Chapter 436. Du Feynman smiled when he saw Zhang Hai's puzzled look. That's right. He wants Zhang Hai to be the middleman. After that, Du Feynman explained to Zhang Hai why he is so close to Zhang Hai. Although Dubai was only a small country, the other Arabian kingdoms were all in the same boat. It could be said that they were bound together for good or ill. This time, Du Feynman not only represented Dubai, but also the other Arabian countries. What do the Arabs produce? Well, apart from the terrorists, the only thing that was successful in producing oil was oil. This was also the foundation of their existence in this world. Their oil was mainly sold to the United States and some European countries. It could be said that although they were rich now, the money was given by the people who bought the oil. In other words, their oil is a buyer's market. If the US and European countries like the UK and France want to buy it, they can make a fortune. If they don't want to buy it, they can just let it rot in their hands. If someone says they want to buy oil, who will not buy it? If the US does not want to buy it, they can just sell it to other countries. But the problem is, do they dare to do it? The Arab royals are rich, but they are not as rich as the US and European countries. This is the biggest problem. They must be prepared for danger in times of peace. Now, they need the royals to stabilize the world. But what if they don't need them one day? Thinking about the wars they had fought in recent years, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, why did the United States attack them? Why did the US attack them? First, it is because they are using bombs. But North Korea is using bombs every day, and the US does not dare to attack them. Of course, the other reason is because North Korea is backed by Hwasya and Soviet Russia. But this is only a theory. Cuba is so close to the US, and the US did not attack them even though they are using bombs every day. This is because these countries do not have what the US needs, such as oil. Wars are not fought for reputation. They were fighting for money. At the very least, they had to be able to earn it back after this battle. This was the philosophy of the West. Therefore, Afghanistan was destroyed, and Iraq was destroyed. Of course, all of this had nothing to do with Zhang Hai, and he had no interest in politics. However, Zhang Hai understood Du Feynman's words. It was impossible for these Arab countries to put all their eggs in one basket. But on the surface, they didn't dare to sell oil to Hwasya, who was the biggest threat to the US government. Therefore, no matter how much the imperial court tried to persuade them, they didn't dare to give in. Because if anyone sold them out and caused a war, with Hwasya's current foreign policy, it was impossible for them to send troops to help. No one wanted to be the second Iraq. Originally, one party was willing to sell and the other party was willing to buy. This was a very simple matter. But the problem was that America was in the middle. Therefore, Du Feynman needed a middleman. He needed an excuse. Whether he was persuaded or threatened, he needed a middleman to divert attention. He originally organized this banquet to find a middleman. But it just so happened that Zhang Hai came back. Rather than find a middleman who he didn't know, he might as well find Zhang Hai. Moreover, Zhang Hai had $400 million of oil futures in his hands. When he heard his words, Zhang Hai was silent for the first time. The first thought that popped up in his mind was that he shouldn't get involved in this muddy water. He was just an idiot. He didn't have any ambition. If he didn't do well, he would become the pressure point between China and the United States. Zhang Hai would be depressed to death. However, what Du Feynman said next made Zhang Hai hesitate. There were only two words. Benefits. The benefits of Zhang Hai being a lobbyist for Hwasya didn't need to be mentioned. Those benefits were still in Penelope's leather bag. To Zhang Hai, those benefits were real. And if he helped Du Feynman would also give him benefits. The benefits were still in two words. Oil. Zhang, to be honest, there are very few oil futures in the outside world, but we have a lot of them. If you are the middleman, we can decide how much you want and sell it to you at a fair price. Under the moonlight, Du Feynman looked at Zhang Hai and smiled gently. He knew that Zhang Hai didn't have much resistance to these words. You really are a bastard. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai's heart itched like a cat was scratching it. Thank you for the compliment, but this is politics. Aside from politics, we can still be friends. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman smiled and said, for him, this was a profitable deal. I want 600 million oil futures now. If I want more, can I buy more? Looking at Du Feynman, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before asking him. Now, Jiang Hai only had 600 million in cash. When he sold gems and other things, he earned less than 1 billion. Of which, 400 million was exchanged for oil futures, and he still had more than 50,000. In addition, he earned more than 300 million from selling cows. Now, Jiang Hai still had more than 800 million in cash. However, the Winthrop construction needed to spend $250 million, so Jiang Hai still had 600 million in cash left. These tens of millions were pocket money and couldn't be used. But the 600 million was useless in the bank. Jiang Hai could exchange it for something more valuable. Oil futures were basically a 20% premium in the current market. If he had 1 billion in oil futures, it would be equivalent to making 200 million for no reason. Most importantly, if he couldn't survive, he could seek refuge with some American tycoons. Even if he went to the White House, he would definitely be a guest of honor with 1 billion in oil futures. Deal, I can sell it to you again. The price is unlimited, but the only requirement is that you can't buy it with others. I'll only sell it to you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Du Feynman chuckled and said, as long as Jiang Hai was willing to be the middleman, not to mention 1 billion oil futures, even 10 billion oil futures would be worth it. Of course, the premise was that Jiang Hai could take out 10 billion. The current Jiang Hai didn't have that much money. But it didn't mean that he wouldn't have it in the future. Of course, the future he was talking about wasn't 10 or 20 years from now. In this world, people were the most unreliable. Du Feynman was so easy to talk to now, but it didn't mean that he would be so easy to talk to in the future when he and Hua Xia had a stable business. It wasn't rare to get rid of someone once they had outlived their usefulness in politics. Therefore, Jiang Hai needed to get the money as quickly as possible. As for how to get it, did it even need to be said? A man couldn't get rich without a windfall, and a horse couldn't get fat without feeding at night. The best way to get Jiang Hai's feeding at night was to sink a ship. He still had the addresses of many shipwrecks in the Caribbean. What others couldn't get didn't mean that he couldn't either. Since there was a first time, there would be a second time, a third time, a fourth time. One ship was worth $1 billion. What about 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8? Du Feynman seemed to be certain that Jiang Hai wouldn't have too much money in a short time, so he would let him bleed a little. The conversation with Du Feynman only lasted for half an hour. Then, Jiang Hai left the second floor with him and stepped into the venue on the first floor. As soon as they came down, Minister Qin saw Jiang Hai immediately. Seeing the smiles on their faces, he knew that this matter was likely to succeed. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had found the right person to look for Jiang Hai this time. He couldn't help but walk over excitedly. He wanted to have a private talk with Jiang Hai later to see what the specific situation was. The other two groups of people who were paying attention to Jiang Hai were Zhou Yu and the Yin family. At that moment, the three members of the Yin family were consciously standing in a corner. After entering the room, although they had already noticed Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they didn't have the leisure to provoke them. Instead, they handed out business cards everywhere, hoping to climb up the social ladder. However, it was a pity that people at this level would more or less dislike their family. Originally, they didn't expect to be able to make friends with these bigwigs through this banquet. They were just there to show their sincerity. After giving out business cards, they had a chance to meet. If they asked for favors in the future, it would be easier to talk to them. After giving out business cards for a long time, they finally got everyone's business cards. Of course, Du Feynman, Jiang Hai, and Qi Li couldn't accept them. Now that they saw Jiang Hai and Du Feynman coming down from upstairs together, the three people couldn't help but feel a little jealous. This wasn't some melodramatic novel. Logically speaking, at this time, Zhang Wu should be showing off in front of his love rival, Jiang Hai, and stepping on Du Feynman while he was at it. Then, after learning Du Feynman's identity, he would be extremely terrified and get beaten up before being chased out. He would harbor a grudge in his heart. If he couldn't take revenge on Du Feynman, he would use his connections to take revenge on Jiang Hai. Assassinations, hooligans looking for trouble, suppression from the imperial court, and so on. Unfortunately, it was really difficult for these things to happen in the real world. Now, let alone looking for trouble with Du Feynman, even if they were closer to Du Feynman, they would be watched by the bodyguards. Not to mention showing off. As for the three things mentioned at the end, other than looking for trouble with hooligans, it was more reliable. Assassinations and suppression from the imperial court were impossible. After all, who was Zhang Hai now? He was Du Feimin's guest. Even the imperial court asked for help from Zhang Hai. Under such circumstances, it was too late to curry favor with Zhang Hai. Not to mention suppressing Zhang Hai. So now when they looked at Zhang Hai, other than envy, jealousy, and hatred, they had no other thoughts. They didn't dare to make a move. Of course, the person called Zhang Rue in Boston was indeed one of them. However, just because they didn't dare to harm Zhang Hai, it didn't mean that Zhang Hai didn't dare to harm them. Chapter 437. Seeing that you are so happy, you must have done it? Looking at Zhang Hai, who was separated from Du Feimin, Minister Qin walked over to Zhang Hai with a smile and asked in a low voice. Of course, I'll leave the rest to you and the imperial court. Although this was just a favor, after all, Du Feimin also intended to sell Huaxia's oil, and he was just an excuse. Zhang Hai was not going to let go of this favor. Especially when Huaxia didn't know about this. Hearing Minister Qin's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and said softly, You are really good. The imperial court owes you a favor. What we agreed on will not change. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. Hearing that Zhang Hai had really done it, Minister Qin couldn't help but wave his fist. This time, he had solved a major problem of the imperial court. Don't wait for the future, I have something to say now. Hearing that Minister Qin was about to leave, Zhang Hai stopped him. What? Has the situation changed? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin was stunned for a moment. What does Zhang Hai mean? Nothing has changed, but didn't our conditions say that I can introduce some animals? I want to introduce 3 kinds of animals now. Looking at Minister Qin, Zhang Hai said seriously. Okay, that's not a problem. Hearing Zhang Hai say this, Minister Qin naturally smiled. What is this? I heard that we can already breed Yangtze River grenadier fish in our country, so the first thing I want is the fry of Yangtze River grenadier fish. Looking at Minister Qin, Zhang Hai said seriously. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin didn't hesitate. Because he didn't know how difficult it was to raise Yangtze River grenadier fish. Indeed, there were artificial breeding methods in China now, and there were about 400,000 fish a year. However, 2/3 of them couldn't survive the first month, and the remaining 1/3 required a lot of manpower to take care of. The most important thing was that this kind of fish couldn't be raised in captivity. It was a migratory fish, and it was not easy to cultivate it with the technology of seawater culture. Because of this kind of fish was really difficult to get. Of course, the so-called difficult to obtain mainly depended on the efforts of the higher-ups. In Huaxia, there was nothing that the imperial court could not do. Okay, that's not a problem. I'll check which fish farm has it. I've heard that this thing is very expensive. It's very likely that you'll have to go to Shanghai to get it. But as long as it's available in China, I'll let you take it away. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin smiled and answered seriously. If Zhang Hai was only after money, then everything was fine. Well, in addition to Yangtze River grenadier fish, I also want the fry of giant yellow croaker. Hearing him say it so easily, Zhang Hai was relieved. It was difficult for others to raise Yangtze River grenadier fish, but it wasn't difficult for Zhang Hai. He just needed to inject spiritual qi into its body, even if it was only a trace of spiritual qi, and Zhang Hai used water plants with spiritual qi to raise it. How could the fish want to die? It was so difficult. That's not a problem. Compared with Yangtze River grenadier fish, giant yellow croaker was easier to find and cheaper. There were many fry in the coastal area. Moreover, Zhang Hai said to buy it, not that it was free. It didn't matter who he sold it to. As for whether it had been divided, it had nothing to do with Minister Qin. As the higher-up said, they had to sell it even if they didn't want to. Even if it had been put in the net, they had to take it out and let Zhang Hai take it away. This was the magnanimity of the imperial court. The last one is Chinese bahaba fish. Seeing that there was no problem with the first 2 kinds of fish, Zhang Hai smiled. This was a good start, so he asked for the 3rd kind of fish. However, Minister Qin couldn't help but frown when he heard this fish. Because he knew that although this fish was expensive, it was not easy to sell this kind of fish, because this fish was a protected animal. Well, I can think of a way, but it's impossible to buy it by quantity. At most, We can sell it by the strips. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin hesitated and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai nodded. He knew that selling by the strips was not a bad idea. Looking at Minister Qin, Zhang Hai asked in a low voice, "How many can you get?" "At most 10. Let me see. If possible, I'll make a population for you." Minister Qin listened to Zhang Hai's words and carefully replied, "Gather a population, this is also an insider's word. Because if a population wants to reproduce, without 3 generations of inbreeding, it needs at least 8 for pairs." Hearing his words, Zhang Hai nodded. 8 is 8. It's better than none. Seeing that Zhang Hai agreed, Minister Qin smiled and immediately left. He still has to report this incident to the imperial court. The Arabian side is willing to sell oil. This is good news. Seeing that Minister Qin left, Zhang Hai also smiled. Just when he was about to eat something again, he noticed a figure sneaking into the venue. Seeing this figure, Zhang Hai smiled and greeted him. "Is it done?" Walking to the side of the figure, Zhang Hai whispered to the man wearing a waiter's uniform. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, this person froze for a moment, then raised his head and laughed self-deprecatingly. "As expected of the boss. You can still recognize me even though I look like this?" Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Azalina's slightly cold voice came from under this completely different appearance. At this time, Azalina didn't look like a woman, not even an Asian. If one looked at her face, they would at most think that she was a handsome young man. She had black eyes, a nose that wasn't as straight, a sharp jaw, and slightly yellow skin. She was about 1.75 meters tall and looked very thin. Her chest was also very flat, and she had a moving Adam's apple. No one would treat her as a woman. However, Zhang Hai was able to see through her disguise at a glance. This was because anyone who was used to eating the meat in his manner would have a familiar aura around them. When he felt this aura, he immediately knew who this person was. Of course, people who only ate a few meals or even a dozen meals wouldn't have this aura. Only people who ate every day would have this aura, because this aura was so little that it was hard to notice if one didn't eat every day. Of course, Zhang Hai wouldn't tell Azalina how he found her. It was very cool to maintain a little mystery in front of his subordinates, so Zhang Hai just glanced at her and said indifferently, "It's been solved. On the way back, I'll invite the boss to watch a free fireworks show." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina chuckled and said slowly to Zhang Hai. Hearing what she said, Zhang Hai also laughed. Looking at the 3 people who were standing there and trying to integrate into the other circles, Zhang Hai's eyes became cold. At this time, Qili also noticed Zhang Hai and walked over from a distance. In just half an hour, Qili was holding a thick stack of business cards in her hand. To be honest, she was originally in the same position as the Yin family. It was impossible for them to participate in such a banquet, let alone be the main character. This time, the reason why Qili became the main character in these people's eyes and tried to give her business cards was mainly because of one person, Zhang Hai. Among the people present, except for Qili, the Yin family, and Azalina, no one knew who Zhang Hai was. But everyone only knew that Zhang Hai had a relationship with Minister Qin of the Ministry of State Security. At the same time, Zhang Hai was also friends with the organizer of this banquet, Du Feynman Vier Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. One was a high-level official of the imperial court, and the other was a rich man in the Middle East. Being friends with these 2 people was worth more than 10,000 ordinary rich people and ordinary officials. It was a bit presumptuous to go directly to Zhang Hai, because they didn't know Zhang Hai's name. But it was easy to find Qili. Although the cheese group was not qualified, at least they knew about it. First he would get to know Qili. Then, he would give her his business card. As for whether it would reach Zhang Hai's ears, that would be another story. "Phew, I kind of regret coming with you. I've become your secretary." Seeing Qili come over, Azalina deliberately left first to avoid trouble. Qili came to Zhang Hai's side. She really didn't recognize Azalina, but stuffed the stack of business cards into Zhang Hai's hand. Zhang Hai just glanced at it casually. This pile of business cards was really interesting. This was a company director, and this was a department director. Yes, department director. People at the department level were definitely not qualified to come to this banquet. And this so-called department was a department with the word state, not a department in the capital. There was a lot of knowledge in this. If this was a book about business or official career, it would be obvious. These business cards would definitely be very useful in the future. But unfortunately, the main theme of this book was leisure and farming. So these things were really useless. Jiang Hai glanced at the stack of business cards and stuffed them into his pocket. Looking at Jiang Hai's action, regardless of whether Jiang Hai would look at them in the future, at least he accepted them now. This was a good sign for these people. Hearing Qi Li's complaint, Jiang Hai smiled and said to Qi Li, "You don't have to accept them if you don't want to." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but smile, and then looked at Jiang Hai with sparkling eyes. "Do you think I'm you? I still have to make a living in China. How about I find a professional manager and then go to the United States with you?" Ugh, hee hee. But hearing her words, Jiang Hai was terrified. If they were really husband and wife, then she didn't want to come. Jiang Hai had to let her come. But the problem now was that there was some trouble between them. "Look at how scared you are. For the time being, I won't go." Seeing Jiang Hai's reaction, Qi Li sighed. It seemed that she still didn't do well enough. But she also knew that she had hurt Jiang Hai's heart before. Now it wasn't so easy to get it back. She had to work hard for this. Chapter 438. Miss Dale. Sitting on the windowsill of the hotel, Delina looked at Penelope Dale, who was cleaning up dinner over there, and said softly. Hearing her words, Penelope couldn't help but raise her head and look at the little girl in front of her. Because Jiang Hai, Azalina, and Qi Li all went to do Feynman's banquet, Penelope and the others had to deal with dinner by themselves. Fortunately, Jiang Hai left them a lot of money, and there was also a lot of money for the room. Whether they went out to eat or ate in the hotel, there was no problem. Of course, Delina and Marian wanted to go out to eat. They were now very curious about the country where Jiang Hai was born. However, Penelope was not at ease, so in the end, they still ate in the hotel. They didn't even go to the restaurant, but asked someone to send them food. Fortunately, the food here was also good, and the three of them were very happy. After dinner, Penelope was cleaning up, while Delina and Marian sat in the distance, playing with their mobile phones or looking out of the window. Suddenly, Delina asked Penelope, which attracted the attention of the three people in the room. "Just call me Penelope, Delina. What's the matter?" Listening to Delina's words, Penelope Dale smiled and continued to clean up in front of her with her head down. The relationship between the surname and first name of Americans was similar to that of Chinese people. Although it was the first name and the last name, generally speaking, people who were not very familiar with each other would call each other by their surname, such as Boss Zhang, Teacher Wang, Master Lu, and so on. In the United States, people who were not very familiar with each other would call each other by their surname instead of their first name. For example, basketball stars, Michael Jordan, were basically called Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal were all called O'Neal. Except for Kobe Bryant, basically 99% of basketball stars were called by their surname instead of their first name. Only people who were close to each other could call each other by their first name. Now, for example, Penelope had already regarded Delina and Marian as friends, so she took the initiative to call them by their first name. She could omit the last name. "All right, Penelope, how old are you this year?" Looking at Penelope, Daliana asked in puzzlement. "Me? I'm 4 years younger than your dad. I'm already 24 this year." Hearing her words, Penelope smiled and said, "Oh, then it seems that you're not much older than us." Hearing her words, Daliana raised her head and said seriously, "Haha, it seems like I should be happy to hear that," Penelope said after hearing Daliana's words. "Hee hee, it's all right. You're indeed not much older than us. You probably don't know what I want to ask." Daliana smiled brightly when she saw Penelope's grateful expression. "Then," she said helplessly, "tell me about it." "Although I'm not that much older than you, I've experienced more than you, so I can understand most things," Penelope said with a smile when she saw Daliana's vexed look. "That's true, but I want to ask you something. You can't tell anyone about it. Do you know what to do?" After hesitating for a few moments, Daliana looked at Penelope and asked curiously, "Do? Ugh, why are you asking this?" Upon hearing Daliana's words, Penelope was stunned. "I'm just curious. Don't think that I don't know anything. I'm already 17 years old this year. According to Hua Xia, I'm already 18 years old. It's not like you don't know where I used to live. In the past, I've seen those older sisters doing that. But back then, they seemed to be in great pain. They screamed miserably, knitted their brows, and sometimes even bled. That made me afraid of that, Daliana said with knitted brows. Upon hearing her words, Marian also walked over and held Daliana's hand. As for Penelope, she also felt a little awkward. Indeed, these two girls couldn't be treated like ordinary high school students. That's why, in order to prevent my younger sister and I from walking down the same path, I learned that in order to earn enough remuneration through labor. But it was also because of this that I met Zhang Hai and lived such a good life now. Looking at her younger sister's expression, Daliana chuckled. That was all in the past. Now, she had almost forgotten about the hellish life she had led. But a while ago, I went to peek at Zhang Hai doing that, and realized that something was amiss. The pain and numbness in the past couldn't be seen on the faces of Zhang Hai and, his opponents. Instead, they seemed to be enjoying it. This made me a little confused. Why is there such a huge difference when it's the same thing? Speaking until here, Daliana couldn't help but raise her head and look at Penelope. In fact, this doubt had appeared in her heart for a long time. They had peeked at Zhang Hai more than once. Zhang Hai and Ai Xiaoxi, Zhang Hai and Feng Yunchen, Zhang Hai, Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, and even Zhang Hai and Afra that night. But the more they peeked at him, the stranger they felt. This doubt had always existed in their hearts. After all, no one taught them this kind of lesson. They wanted to ask because SH20 Clive was the best teacher. But they also knew that there was something between SH20 Clive and Zhang Hai that couldn't be explained clearly. They still wanted SH20 Clive to be their mother. If they said that, then this matter would probably be ruined. As for Feng Yunchen, Afra, and Ai Xiaoxi, they were a little embarrassed. After all, they were the ones who peeked at them. Daliana and the others also didn't know what to say. After all, they were very clear about the thoughts of these women. They couldn't wait to strip themselves naked and send themselves to Zhang Hai's bed. As for the others, they were Zhang Hai's subordinates, so they didn't dare to ask. That's why they held back for so long. After coming here, they met an outsider, Penelope. This is indeed hard to say. But what you saw before should be those bad guys who forced the girls to do it. They didn't have any feelings for each other and didn't have any foreshadowing. Therefore they might feel a lot of pain in their hearts. But in order to live, they could only accept such things. As for the Zhang Hai you saw later, they should be willing to do it. Both of them were in love with each other and had mutual respect for each other. Therefore when they did it, they felt comfortable. It's like learning. If you are willing to learn, then you will naturally learn very smoothly and quickly. But if you are not willing to learn, then learning will be very difficult. You will feel like a day is like a year. Hearing Delina's words, Penelope's face couldn't help but turn red. But she also knew that someone should teach them this matter, so that they wouldn't be hurt in the future. If that happened, it would be too late. So although she was a little shy, she still said slowly. It's just that the example she gave later, it's a matter of opinion. In fact, Penelope herself was also an exception, because she also didn't experience it. In the United States, 80% of girls will lose their thing before entering college. Among the remaining 20%, more than 15% will lose their thing because of their family's religion. For example, they believe in Catholicism. More strict families naturally won't allow this. Among the remaining 5%, 40% is because they are too ugly, and the remaining 1% is Penelope. Both of them are in love with each other? Just like us and Zhang Hai? Hearing Penelope's words, Marian interrupted and asked at this time. You are not, you are father and daughter. But hearing Marian's words, Penelope immediately shook her head. But we don't treat him as a father. He is not much older than us. Hearing her words, Daliana also said immediately. Looking at the two of them with golden eyes, Penelope couldn't help but shake her head. It seems, it's going to be bad. You don't treat him as a father, but he treats you as his daughter. Don't make a fuss, you are just a combination of gratitude and worship, that's not love. After thinking about it, in order to avoid a possible tragedy, Penelope said seriously. She didn't know why, but when Daliana and Marian said that they liked Zhang Hai, she was a little anxious. Really? Hearing Penelope's words, Daliana and Marian looked at each other. They were also a little confused. But in their hearts, they made a decision at the same time. Although they don't know whether their feelings for Zhang Hai are a combination of worship and gratitude, they want to see if Zhang Hai really feels like a daughter to them, like Penelope said. Achoo! At this time, Zhang Hai, who was eating Yangtze River grenadier fish, suddenly sneezed, and then pinched his nose in confusion. Achoo! At this time, Zhang Hai, who was eating Yangtze River grenadier fish, suddenly sneezed, and then pinched his nose in confusion. Have you caught a cold? Watching Zhang Hai, Qili, who was sitting beside him, couldn't help but ask in a low voice. To be honest, Qili was very happy at this banquet. Because Zhang Hai was sitting beside her, nobody dared to glance at her like a wolf like before, nobody dared to talk about her behind her back, not to mention find her trouble. How comfortable it was to have a man to rely on. Pitifully, she didn't know that before. Now that she thought about it, she was really too silly at that time. Now that she heard Zhang Hai sneeze, she asked anxiously as if a small cold was a serious illness. At this moment, she began to imagine Zhang Hai falling sick and lying on the bed. She would take care of him, wipe the juice on him, feed him medicine, and warm him up if he was too cold. Of course, it wouldn't be a normal warmth, but two people. Hee. No. But it was a pity that Zhang Hai wouldn't let her take care of him because he wouldn't fall sick at all. How could they fall sick when they were both at the limit of their bodies? Therefore, he was just a little confused. Why did he sneeze? Sir, did you add too much pepper? At this moment, the chef in front of him was stunned for a moment before asking. It's okay, this is the best flavor. Hearing the chef's words, Zhang Hai suddenly realized that it might be because of this. Chapter 439. What a shameless couple. Looking at Zhang Hai and Qili in the distance, and Zhang Wu, who was sitting in the corner, gritted his teeth with hatred. Originally, they were giving out business cards and preparing to get to know these people, so they didn't have much time and leisure to deal with Zhang Hai. However, when he finished giving out business cards, these people didn't want to take the Yin family to have fun. They had nothing to do and were reluctant to leave. At this time, they could only turn their attention to other things. There were only 3 highlights of this banquet. First, food, drink, and social interaction. For example, the Yin family didn't lack food and drink, but no one was willing to take them to have fun. They couldn't stick to them, because it would be annoying, so Zhang Wu could only turn his attention to other places. As soon as he turned his attention, he saw Zhang Hai and Qili. At this time, the two were sitting in front of teppanyaki and eating happily. Zhang Hai liked to eat Yangtze River grenadier fish very much, because this fish tasted really good, but there was a problem. This fish had too many bones. If it was roasted too crispy, it would lose the taste of fish, and the loss would outweigh the gain. If it wasn't roasted too crispy, although it had the taste of fish, there would be too many bones. Maybe they could tell that Zhang Hai liked to eat it. On this side, Qili had been sitting beside Zhang Hai, picking out the bones on the fish for Zhang Hai. She picked out the bones one by one, even if they were burrs. After picking out the meat, she gave it to Zhang Hai to eat. Looking at Qili's virtuous appearance, and Zhang Wu really hated her. He felt that his teeth were itching, and he felt that his face was turning green. And Zhang Wu really liked Qili. Even now the relationship between the two families had reached this point, he still liked Qili very much. After the Qili family's accident, he was really sad and decadent for more than a year. He didn't come out until Zhang asked him to. After being rejected by Qili again and again, he thought that he would forget her, but he found that he couldn't. Even when he went out to have fun, he had to find a woman who looked like Qili. Compared to him and Zhang Hai, his heart was now even more sour. When he was with Qili, he really treated Qili like a queen. When Lu Li ate melon seeds, he had to use his fingers to pull them out because Qili, who used his teeth, found it dirty. When he ate crab with Qili, he had to take out all the meat himself, and the appearance of the crab had to be kept intact. Otherwise, Qili wouldn't eat it. He was the one who picked out the bones when eating fish, and he was the one who carried the bags when going out. Even if she cooked at home, he still had to do the cooking, tidy up, and wash the dishes. In his world, Qili was a queen. She was an emperor, and he had to serve her well. Even so, the two of them eventually developed to the point where they could hold hands when going out on the street. That was all. But now what did he see? Qi Li carried her bag by herself, and Qi Li picked out the fish for Jiang Hai. She took the initiative to carry the food for Jiang Hai. She even cleaned up the leftovers of Jiang Hai's food. Even so, she took the initiative to stick to Jiang Hai and brazenly let Jiang Hai have a mistress. Was this still the Qi Li he knew? Was Qi Li crazy? The more he looked, the more he thought, the angrier he became. Why did the woman he loved the most turn into the woman he desired the most in someone else's arms? Now, from the inside to the outside, she was the woman who would only appear in his dreams. But now, this woman had nothing to do with him. Oh no, it was not that she had nothing to do with him. She was his enemy. He wanted to stab his enemy to death. It was not hatred born from love, but pure hatred. There was nothing else mixed in. At a certain moment, Zhanghu's heart tightened for no reason, and then he felt a sharp pain. Bang! Carelessly, Zhangwu knocked over a plate next to him. The sound of the plate shattering attracted the attention of the people around him. However, when they saw that Zhangwu's face was ashen and his body was sweating, they were all stunned. Zhangwu, how is Zhangwu? Seeing this, Zhangyong and Indushuan rushed over first. Looking at their son and brother, the two of them were a little anxious. They patted his face and asked in a low voice. It should be an acute heart attack. Let's go to the hospital first. At this time, the doctor in charge of the villa also rushed over. After giving Zhangwu 2 tablets of nitroglycerin, he immediately said to Zhangyong and Zhangshuan in front of him, "Let's go." Although he was a little reluctant to leave the banquet, his son's life was more valuable. So after Zhangwu sighed, he smiled at the people around him. The two of them carried Zhangwu, who could no longer speak, out of the villa. When Zhangwu walked out of the villa, Jiang Hai and Qi Li also noticed the movement there. They should not be able to see the sun tomorrow. Although she did not know how Jiang Hai arranged it, with her understanding of Jiang Hai, Qi Li knew that Jiang Hai would definitely make a move. She could not help but whisper, "What? Are you distressed? If you are distressed, you can stop them now, and they will not die." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai said indifferently while eating fish. Of course, these words were a little harsh. "What are you talking about? Really, I'm distressed for my dad. I'm distressed that he didn't see them die with his own eyes." Turning her head and rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said hatefully while cleaning up the fish. The trace of pity in her original words had long disappeared. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shrugged. For these people, directly killing them was the easiest thing to do. Watching these 3 people leave, Azalina, who had been hiding in the villa, also unknowingly left. 5 minutes later, the taxi under the surveillance in the distance finally had a tow truck, and the chubby driver also came over. After negotiating with the tow truck driver for a while, the tow truck was towed away. On the other side, Zhangwu, Zhangyong, and Zhangshuan also got in their own car. After they gave the order, Jiang Rue, who actually came tonight, started the engine. In fact, to be honest, after they learned that Jiang Hai had returned, they were also afraid that Jiang Hai would fight to the death. In case Jiang Hai wanted to deal with them, Jiang Rue, a former mercenary, could help them. However, if Jiang Hai didn't want to make a move in the villa, then there was no need to use Jiang Rue. Therefore, Jiang Rue only played the role of a driver today. If Jiang Hai knew that he could eliminate 4 of his enemies today, he would really laugh in his dreams. After starting the engine, the car slowly drove away from the villa's parking lot and rushed in the direction of the city. "Dad, why don't you go back? This kind of opportunity is very rare." Clutching his chest, Zhangwu, who felt a little better, looked at Zhangshuan sitting next to him, hesitated for a moment, and whispered, "What nonsense are you talking about? How long can your dad live? This company will belong to you 2 brothers sooner or later. For me, you 2 are the most important. Don't talk. Wait until we get checked out in the hospital." Hearing Zhangwu's words, Zhangshuan glanced at him, then showed a slightly gratified smile on his face, and said to Zhangwu. Listening to his father's words, Zhangwu couldn't help but raise his head. This meant that he didn't want to let his tears fall. He suddenly felt that he was so stupid. For a woman who had a change of heart, he was so sad. But now he understood that in the future, he was only in Zhangwu, and Qi Li was only his enemy. He would definitely make Qi Li and Jiang Hai regret it. But unfortunately, he might not be able to see that day. The car was driving faster and faster, and the distance between them and the city was getting shorter and shorter, but they didn't notice that the water temperature seemed to be a little wrong. At this moment, a thin layer of something similar to a sugar coating in the water tank was gradually melting under the gradually hot water. When the water melted this layer of sugar coating, the cesium in the sugar coating also came into contact with the water. Bang! With a loud sound, the cesium and the water came into contact, and at the same time, hydrogen was produced, and it exploded. After hearing a loud noise, thick smoke instantly came out from the front cover of the car. The entire car was no longer under control at this time. Among the 4 people in the car, Zhangxuan, Zhangwu, and Zhangyong were all stunned. He immediately grabbed the armrest next to him, and Zhangwu's face seemed to be even more ugly. But fortunately, Zhang Rui was here at this time. Although Zhang Rui had no way to stop the car, after all, the brakes had failed, he still controlled the car to crash into the strongest section of the barrier next to him. This meant that he wanted to forcibly stop the car. Only a bang sound was heard, and the car hit the barrier heavily. After all, this car was also a car that cost hundreds of thousands. After hitting the car, the airbag would naturally pop out. Instead, it was a ball of flame. It didn't give Zhang Rui any time to react at all. The flame had already engulfed the 4 people in the car with an incomparable momentum in an instant. At this moment, Jiang Hai's phone also vibrated. He saw that an unfamiliar number had sent him a photo. The photo was of the car that caught fire. After deleting the photo, Jiang Hai put the phone back into his pocket. His originally gloomy face also became better at this time. The matter that had been tormenting him for so long was finally solved. When the fire truck and the police arrived, there were only 4 charred bodies left in the car. As for the reason why the car lost control and caught fire, the preliminary judgment was that the water temperature was too high, so the car overheated. At the same time, it caused the brakes to fail and hit the barrier. Because the car's internal combustion engine leaked out, it caused the fire, which caused the car to catch fire. However, logically speaking, even if the car caught fire, there should be about a buffer of about 10 minutes. But why didn't the 4 people in the car escape during this time? This made the police very puzzled. Chapter 440. According to the latest news received by this station, at about 22:13 last night, a Ford sedan was driving at the entrance to the city. When the water temperature passed the threshold, the brakes failed, causing a car accident and causing the car to spontaneously combust. All 4 people in the car were killed. The relevant departments remind everyone who is driving to check the data of the car before driving. Don't be in a hurry to drive and repeat the same mistake. Jiang Hai chuckled as he watched the news broadcasters from the Yuehun tribe report on the TV. This thing was not something that could be solved by careful inspection. However, it did not matter. As long as these guys were dealt with, Jiang Hai's mood would be much better. It seemed that accepting Azalina was really something to be happy about. After returning last night, Jiang Hai washed up and went to bed. However, he did not know that the imperial capital was in turmoil at this time. However, the shock subsided in the morning. When he got up and turned on the TV in the morning, he saw this news. 3 people from the Andersons all died last night. Now the Andersons are in a mess. Several major directors, as well as Anderson's wife, nephew, and niece, are all fighting for control of the Andersons. Our Chile group has also eaten up a lot of their family property in one go. Are you interested in taking a share? Pushing open the door, Chile walked in excitedly. In this world, there were only 3 things that could make her happy. The first was Jiang Hai, the second was attacking the Andersons, and the third was making money by doing business. Now that Jiang Hai helped her attack the Andersons to make money, these 3 things were put together. She could not be unhappy. Forget about me. Do you think the people in the imperial court are stupid? Someone must have contacted them. This matter may have something to do with me. Although there is no specific evidence, if I go too far, wouldn't it be like confessing without being pressed? Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He did not have the intention to buy domestic shares or anything. There was no way to manage it, and it would be easy to attract hatred. This was also the reason why, even if he had so much money in the United States, he did not invest in the financial industry. Firstly, it was too dangerous. Secondly, it was too high profile. He preferred to make a fortune in silence. The rest had nothing to do with him. That's true. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li, who was originally a little tempted, couldn't help but calm down. She knew even less than Jiang Hai what the imperial court was like and how powerful it was. Now, the imperial court had chosen to cover up this matter. If she and Jiang Hai didn't know when to back off, the imperial court would fall out with them in the end. It was fine for Jiang Hai. After all, his foundation was abroad, but the Qi enterprise would definitely suffer. Thinking of this, Qi Li called back to the company and asked the people in the company to be more reserved. If anything happened, the company should not be implicated. Is there anywhere you want to go today? Now that we have solved the problem on our minds, we can have fun. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li sat next to Jiang Hai and deliberately sat very close to him. If it weren't for the fear of scaring Jiang Hai, she would have directly sat in Jiang Hai's arms. After this incident, her feelings for Jiang Hai became deeper and deeper. Women admired those who could make them feel powerful. Jiang Hai was like this. Jiang Hai could raise cows and earn more than $1 billion a year. Jiang Hai's fighting ability could subdue mountain lions. Jiang Hai's subordinates could take care of the family. In Qi Li's eyes, how could she have been so blind to not see Jiang Hai's shining point? How could she have pushed away a man who could make money, have a strong body, and give people the greatest sense of security? Thinking of this, Qi Li really felt that she was really blinded by hatred. She didn't catch such a good man. Now, if she wanted to catch him again, it seemed that there were many enemies. Play? I really don't know. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then he touched his chin and said. Jiang Hai was telling the truth. He really didn't know what to play. In fact, almost all the tourist cities in China were like this. There were some scenic spots that people didn't want to go a second time after they had been there, such as the imperial capital. If it weren't for accompanying others, Jiang Hai wouldn't have wanted to go to places like the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, and the like. After all, he was just a tourist, not a person who studied these things, so he wasn't so crazy about these things. You have been to the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, the Bird's Nest, and the Ihi Garden and the Old Summer Palace, and the Great Wall. You don't want to go shopping, so where should we go? Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't know where to go, Qi Li also sat there and thought about it. But to be honest, Qi Li had lived in the imperial capital for many years. But she really didn't know what to play in the imperial capital, because when she was young, she basically went to the park and was very happy to go to the amusement park. Later, when she was in university, she didn't stay in China. Less than a year after she came back from university, something happened to her family. Then she worked crazily until now. Now that she had her revenge, and with Jiang Hai accompanying her, she wanted to relax and play with Jiang Hai. But the problem was that she didn't know where to play, because she had been to the places that Jiang Hai had been to, and she had also been to the places that Jiang Hai hadn't been to. She naturally hadn't been to the places that Jiang Hai hadn't been to. Why don't we ask Feng Yunchen? This guy should be very familiar with the imperial capital. After thinking for a long time, Qi Li still couldn't figure out where to go to play. She hesitated for a moment. Then she said to Jiang Hai. Her. Although Jiang Hai was a dull person, he wasn't stupid. He could see that Qi Li was interested in him, and he and Feng Yunchen, well, speaking of this relationship, there was also some entanglement. Originally, if Qi Li wasn't here today, then Jiang Hai might call her, but now that Qi Li was here, Jiang Hai was a little overwhelmed, not to mention that it was proposed by Qi Li. What? Are you done playing with her? Seeing Jiang Hai's slightly awkward expression, Qi Li was still very gratified. At least this proved that Jiang Hai cared about her thoughts, but now what she wanted to do most was to please Jiang Hai, and other things didn't matter for the time being. Because she knew that although Feng Yunchen and Jiang Hai had such a relationship, she couldn't become Jiang Hai's wife. Having such an informant was not a bad thing for Qi Li. AI? What are you talking about? Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. If you aren't tired, then sit and wait. Seeing Jiang Hai's awkward look, Qi Li laughed, picked up the phone, and dialed a number on it. After a few rings, the phone was picked up. Hello, Feng Yunchen. Jiang Hai is now in the hotel's XX building, XX suite. I'll give you half an hour to dress up, or we'll go out and play. We won't wait for you. Listening to Feng Yunchen on the other side of the phone, Qi Li on the other side was already talking like a machine gun. Then, without waiting for Feng Yunchen to answer, she directly hung up the phone. Just after Qi Li hung up the phone, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, who were driving to work at this time, instantly turned the steering wheel and rushed directly to the hotel. They ran 3 red lights along the way. Not to mention half an hour, it didn't even take 20 minutes. Zhang Hai's doorbell had already rung. When he opened the door, Zhang Hai saw the figures of Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi. Looking at the 2 beautiful women in front of him, and the 2 beautiful women also looked at the embarrassed Zhang Hai in front of them. The anger in their eyes was even more intense. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai was even more embarrassed. You bastard, you didn't even call us when you returned to China. Who do you think we are? The 2 women looked at Zhang Hai. Ai Xiaoxi just felt a little sad. She felt that she seemed to have a relatively low position in Zhang Hai's heart. He didn't call her when he returned to China, and Feng Yunqin directly yelled, pointing at Zhang Hai and shouting. Let's talk about it inside the house. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was so embarrassed that his cancer was about to act up. What was this? No, we still have to go to work after scolding you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Feng Yunqin on the other side also shouted loudly. Hey, you guys come back first. It's not what you think, otherwise, I wouldn't have called you. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say, but Qi Li stood up at this time and said to the 2 women in front of her. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi also glanced at Zhang Hai and then walked in. But when they went in, they didn't sit down, but stood at the door and looked at Zhang Hai coldly. Don't be so bitter and hateful. Zhang Hai didn't call you for your own good. After all, Zhang Hai's return this time is very dangerous. Looking at the 2 of them, to be honest, Qi Li couldn't help but be happy. Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi were taking advantage of this opportunity to break up with Zhang Hai. However, she also knew that this was impossible. So sometimes, it was better to say it herself than Zhang Hai saying it to them in the future. Therefore she opened her mouth first. Then Qi Li roughly talked about the purpose of Zhang Hai's return this time. After listening to Qi Li's words, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi didn't relax, but walked directly to Zhang Hai and looked at Zhang Hai angrily. You didn't even tell us such a big thing. If something happened to you, do you want us to live as widows? Feng Yunqin pinched Zhang Hai fiercely, and said to Zhang Hai with a face full of anger. The fierce character of a northeastern girl is not ordinary. And Ai Xiaoxi is not bad. Not only did she pinch Zhang Hai, but she also deliberately glanced at Zhang Hai. This guy really doesn't know how to cherish himself. But after pinching, she carefully looked at Zhang Hai, fearing that he would be hurt. Okay, don't be mushy. You don't take me seriously. Don't worry, your Zhang Hai is fine. Everything was done by his subordinates. Looking at the appearance of these 2, Qi Li said angrily. Subordinates? Belle Lester? Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunqin couldn't help but ask with some doubts. Hey boss, where are we going to play today? But at this moment, the door was opened again, and Azalina walked in excitedly, and when she saw Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, the 3 of them couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 441. The Imperial Capital. There are a lot of places to play, but there are not many that you are interested in. Sitting on the sofa in Zhang Hai's suite, Feng Yunqin looked at Zhang Hai and said seriously because she had just mentioned a lot of places, but they were all rejected by Zhang Hai. In fact, the Imperial Capital was a large city in China. Not only were there scenic spots, but there were also many places to play. In addition to the scenic spots such as the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, the Old Summer Palace, and the Bird's Nest, there were actually many places to play. For example, Happy Valley could be played, Dongdan, Shidon, and Wang's Mansion could be shopped. There were many aquariums, zoos, and various parks in the Imperial Capital, such as Hohai, Shikahai, Xiangshan, and a series of other scenic spots. They were all very good, but unfortunately, Zhang Hai was not willing to go. When it came to shopping, how could the Imperial Capital be cheaper and better than New York? He couldn't see the aquariums and zoos in the United States. What's more, the species of animals in his manor may not be less than those in zoos. The coral reef in the aquarium was enough to beat any aquarium in the country. Even if it was any aquarium in the world, Zhang Hai would not be afraid. So after talking for a long time, Zhang Hai was not willing to go to these places to play. As for the 30-mile village that Feng Yunqin mentioned, Zhang Hai didn't even have the slightest interest in it. The place he hated the most was nightclubs. What's more, it was daytime now, so after talking for a while, Feng Yunchen was a little speechless because it seemed that Zhang Hai didn't like anything. Then, Zhang Hai, what are you interested in? Go to the place you are interested in. Just as Feng Yunchen was worried, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but interrupt, but after listening to her words, the other people in the room looked at her strangely. This made her wonder. Why are they looking at me like this? Did I say something wrong? You have been with him for a while. Don't you know that this guy is only interested in eating? Glancing at AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen took the initiative to speak. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Zhang Hai also laughed. Indeed, he was a person who did not care much about other things. The thing he cared about the most in his life was eating. But there really isn't anything good to eat in the capital. AI Xiaoxi muttered softly as she curled her lips. Indeed, although the imperial capital was called the imperial capital, there really wasn't much specialty food. Speaking of the imperial capital, other than pastries, the two most delicious things were the imperial capital roast duck and the hot pot. But when it came to authentic instant boiled mutton, it had to be Meng Nei. Roast duck was too greasy and couldn't be eaten in the morning. Moreover, Zhang Hai and the others had already eaten it. It was indeed not suitable to eat too much of it. Other than that, there were all kinds of small pastries. What? There were also some specialty food. Ugh, although Zhang Hai liked to eat the specialty food of the imperial capital, to be honest, he personally was not used to eating it. For example, he couldn't eat braised food. Soy milk was even worse. He didn't like to eat fried liver. The same was true for Jiaochuan. He didn't eat fried chicken ****, sesame tofu, so except for some pastries that could be bought all over the world, such as rolling donkey and sakima, the imperial capital was really not a place to eat delicious food in his eyes. Of course, in the future, Zhang Hai would understand that Huaxia was indeed a world of food, but most of the cuisines belonged to the local region. The things that were delicious for the locals were really not used to eating when foreigners came. For example, Jiangsu and Zhejiang cuisines, Shanghai cuisines, Cantonese cuisines. According to Zhang Hai's taste, he was more used to eating Shandong, Sichuan, and Hunan cuisines. However, among these three cuisines, those who couldn't eat salty food couldn't eat Shandong cuisine, those who couldn't eat spicy food couldn't eat Sichuan cuisine, and those who couldn't eat pure spicy food couldn't eat Hunan cuisine. Therefore, the difference was really big. Now in the imperial capital, Zhang Hai and the others didn't know what to eat. Of course, they didn't know where to go to play. For a while, they just sat in the room awkwardly. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Zhang Hai and the others were watching TV awkwardly and thinking about where to go to play, there was a knock on the door. Zhang Hai opened the door and saw that the person outside was none other than Minister Qin. As soon as he saw Minister Qin, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, but Minister Qin laughed. Brother Zhang, thank you so much for last night. If it weren't for you, the imperial court might have been in trouble this time. I still have to say that you helped. Today, I told the imperial court about this matter, and the imperial court sent someone over to talk about it. Mr. Du Feynman has already agreed. We're talking now. As soon as he saw Zhang Hai, Minister Qin laughed and said. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also laughed. How was this his idea? It was Du Feynman's intention to sell it. However, he lacked an excuse, and Zhang Hai was the most important excuse. However, for this reason, he also extorted 600 million yuan of oil futures from Du Feynman. Of course, he wanted more than this. This time, after plundering in Huaxia, he planned to go to South America and the Caribbean. Those sunken ships would rust if they stayed under the sea, so he might as well give them to himself. As long as everything is going well, come in and sit down. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai naturally didn't say much. He chuckled and motioned for Minister Qin to come in and sit down. However, when Minister Qin saw the room full of women, he was a little surprised. He really didn't expect that Zhang Hai's usual style would be so open. How long did he delay? So many people, brother. Is there anything you need? If there's something, I'll take my leave first. Let's talk when we have time. Looking at the people in the room, Minister Qin smiled at Zhang Hai and then said to him, Oh, there's nothing to do now. Originally, we wanted to go out today, but we didn't know where to go. I've visited all the scenic spots. Minister Qin also knows that I'm in Boston in the United States, which is very close to New York, so I don't want to go to the shopping malls in China. I'm not interested in the zoo, parks, amusement parks, and so on. I feel that nightclubs are very noisy and I don't like them, so now I'm a little hesitant and don't know where to go. Hearing Minister Qin's words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said with a smile. He was telling the truth, because he really didn't know where to go. Oh. Then what are you interested in? Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Minister Qin couldn't help but frown. According to what Jiang Hai said, there really wasn't any place to play. Eating. Looking at Minister Qin, Jiang Hai said his hobby with a little embarrassment. Eating? Haha, eating is good, but it's not the time to eat now. How about this? I'll be the host today. I'll treat you and your sisters-in-law. At noon, we'll go to the Tan family's cuisine, and at night, we'll go to the Li family's cuisine. As for the place to go, how about we go to the Pan Garden now? In the afternoon. I remember that you like those ingredients, right? I have a place that you'll definitely be satisfied with. However, Minister Qin came prepared after all. After hearing Jiang Hai's request, he hesitated for a moment and said directly. Hearing the words sisters-in-law, except for Qi Li, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunchen, everyone else had some strange expressions on their faces. Azalina didn't care, but Daliana and Marian were very interested. As for Penelope, she was only shy. Now she had no other choice but to pretend that she didn't understand. Tan family's cuisine? Li family's cuisine? Pan Garden? After hearing these three nouns, Jiang Hai temporarily forgot to explain this matter, because for a foodie, the first two nouns are too important. He was stunned for a moment, then patted his head. How could he forget these restaurants? Tan family's cuisine and Li family's cuisine are famous official dishes. It is not an exaggeration to say that they imitate the imperial cuisine. For a foodie, the three major private cuisines of Hua Xia, Tan family's cuisine, Li family's cuisine, and Kong family's cuisine, are the pinnacle of the culinary world. The most famous one is Kong family's cuisine, but that is in Lu province. Both of these restaurants are in the capital. It would be a pity if he didn't try them in the capital. Why didn't Jiang Hai think of this before? Another place is Pan Garden. Jiang Hai has also heard of it. Of course, he mainly heard about it from movies and TV series. Pan Garden used to be called the Antique Market. It was also the largest antique trading market in the capital. Of course, now there are definitely many fake goods there. Most of them are modern imitations. However, if you don't have the intention of finding treasures, but just going there for a stroll, it is a good place to go. Jiang Hai is not interested in antiques, and so on. But it doesn't matter if you go there. Seeing that Jiang Hai is quite interested, everyone in the room can't help but shrug their shoulders. They just talked about it, but Jiang Hai is not interested. Indeed, it seems that the places that men want to go are indeed not the same as the places that women want to go. However, since Jiang Hai has already decided where he wants to go, they will not stop him. Just like that, everyone has decided on today's itinerary. The people going are Jiang Hai, Minister Qin, Daliana, Marian, Penelope, Azalina, Qi Li, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunchen. There are a total of 9 people. The car definitely can't fit all of them. Fortunately, Minister Qin was very helpful. After a phone call, a brand new Nissan and a driver arrived in less than 10 minutes. After they got in the car, Minister Qin ordered everyone to leave first and head to the Panjiayuan Old Goods Market. Looking at Minister Qin sitting in front, Jiang Hai's face showed a smile, but he muttered to himself in his heart. This Minister Qin asked me to come today. It's definitely not as simple as just treating me to a meal. After all, this guy is the deputy minister of a top department. Although he is just a deputy, he is not so free as to ask me to make fun of me. However, according to what he said, Du Feimin's side is progressing very well. Why is he looking for me? Although he is a little curious, Jiang Hai decided not to ask any more. There will be a way when the car gets to the mountain, and the boat will cross the bridge when it gets there. Today I have to play and eat. There will be a time when he can't hold it in anymore. When he wants to say it, I'll wait and see. P.S. After looking at the book review section, Xiao Fei chuckled. Xiao Fei originally didn't want to write about the country, because there are too many people with fragile hearts. They can't make any jokes. Therefore, when writing about the country, It will inevitably involve some problems with the differences between different places. In the eyes of these people, it is blatant discrimination. You are looking down on the people of that place. Xiao Fei can't say anything about this. Who can control fragile hearts? He likes to think this way. I can't do anything about it. As for writing about other countries, to be honest, there are also people who criticize Xiao Fei for not being patriotic. Xiao Fei has seen all of these before. Some people don't even read the book. They only criticize in the book review section. What can Xiao Fei say? Xiao Fei, who criticizes them, is as uneducated as them? Therefore, Xiao Fei can only ignore them. He will write what he wants to write and post what he wants to post. He can't let them disrupt Xiao Fei's original steps. However, after this section, Xiao Fei tried his best not to write about the country. In this world, there are too many people with fragile hearts and people who stand on the moral high ground. The above is free. Chapter 442. Panjiayuan Old Goods Market. This place was quite famous, whether in novels or in movies and TV series. Generally, people who wanted to find good treasures would come here. It was also the place where a lot of male protagonists in treasure appraisal novels rose to prominence. There was a time when Jiang Hai also liked to read treasure appraisal novels, but later on, some of them were overwritten, so they were mostly the same. Moreover, some people who wrote this kind of novel knew a lot, but there were many people who just followed the trend. They didn't have too much knowledge, so it seemed that sometimes they didn't know as much as the readers. However, it was also because of this that Jiang Hai had a rough idea of how to appraise some antiques. Of course, he only had a rough idea. He could fool people who didn't know anything, but he was far from being an expert. He didn't know anything about the type, dynasty, or color. The only thing he knew was carbon-14, but there was no way to test it. With carbon-14's current age, it couldn't be determined within a few hundred years. Unless he directly took out a bronze from the Shang and Zhou dynasties, he could determine whether it was real or fake. The current mainstream was artifacts from the Ming and Qing dynasties, so it was difficult to determine whether they were real or fake. This could only be done by guessing. Of course, Jiang Hai was just there to shop. He didn't intend to buy these things. Jiang Hai never believed in luck, so he never gambled, nor did he buy lottery tickets. Well, he had bought lottery tickets before, but the most he won was 5 yuan. Buying antiques, buying the lowest price, and so on, he naturally didn't believe in it. Panjiayuan was located on the East Third Ring Road of the imperial capital, so it wasn't very far. If there was no traffic jam, it would take 10 minutes to get there by car. During these 10 minutes, Minister Qin had been telling Jiang Hai the story of this place. In the past, it wasn't called an old goods market, but an antique market. However, the current imperial court had a clear rule about antiques. What was yours was the imperial courts, and what was the imperial courts was still the imperial courts. As long as it was a civilian antique, no one was allowed to buy or sell it privately, no matter if it was a national treasure or not. Because of this, people came here every day to check. Later, perhaps the owner couldn't stand it anymore, so he changed the name to Old Goods Market. You couldn't check a old goods market, right? Old things and second-hand furniture. I can sell them for as much as I want. It has nothing to do with anyone else. As a result, it gradually became a famous antique street, also known as the Street of Liars. The entire Pan Garden covered an area of 48,600 square meters. Of course, it was much smaller than Jiang Hai's manor. It was divided into stalls, ancient buildings, classical furniture, modern collections, stone carvings, and some restaurants. In the past, this might have been a place to trade antiques, but now it had become a scenic spot. There's nothing good sold here now. You can go in and take a look, but it depends on your mood to buy. But it's best if you don't spend more than 100 yuan. After all, our money doesn't grow on trees. We have to be careful. Looking at Jiang Hai and the others, Department Head Qin introduced them with a smile. Indeed, according to what he said. How could a pie fall from the sky so easily? 99% of the things here are fake. If you just like a decoration and play with it, it's not bad, but if you really spend a lot of money and believe it, then it's a big loss. You said that there's no real thing here now. If you want to buy real things, when do you have to come? Hearing Minister Qin's words, Feng Yunchen was also very interested. After all, in her eyes, money is still very important. If she can buy something good with it, it would be great. So after hesitating for a moment, she asked Minister Chin. This pan garden, there's no real goods from Monday to Sunday. The real things are sold in the shop, and the price is also very high. If you want to buy something, the only chance is every Saturday and Sunday morning, when the sun just comes out, that is, around 4 o'clock in the morning. At that time, this is called the ghost market. At that time there may be some good things. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Minister Chin also said with a smile, and when Jiang Hai heard his words, he couldn't help but think of the origin of this ghost market. According to legend, the origin of this ghost market was during the Manchurian Tatar period. At that time, the people in the imperial capital were more or less particular about appearance. When they met, they called each other Lord, and no one was afraid of each other. However, there will always be a time when the family can't survive, so at that time, some people with wealth will sell some of the things in the family, which are some antiques and the like. They are afraid that others will see it, so they cover their faces and come to sell it very early in the morning. No one knows who the buyer and seller are, so it's called the ghost market. Of course, there is another saying, that is, at the end of the years, some Wangye people in the imperial palace stole things and sold them here. Naturally, they don't want others to know that they are the ones who sold it. So speaking of it, this is also a kind of culture in the imperial capital. But for the people in the imperial capital, buying things is still at that time. Of course, Jiang Hai and the others are just going to stroll around now. After parking the car, Minister Chin led Jiang Hai and the others into the Pan Garden Old Goods Market. As soon as they walked in, they found that there are really a lot of people here. In addition to a large number of foreigners, there are also many groups of tourists and local young people. After walking in, Jiang Hai found that there were some shops and stalls here. They were really full of dazzling things. Of course, the things outside are more or less some handicrafts, which are not worth much. The really valuable things can only be seen inside. There are Buddha statues, porcelain, bronze, bracelets, Buddhist beads, sky eyes, and so on. Everything is here. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai felt his eyes light up. The things here are really complete. In fact, you can buy everything you want here. Seeing Jiang Hai's surprised look, Minister Chin walked over with a smile and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded. Indeed, the things here are very complete. Out of the parking lot, first is the classical hall, then the modern collection hall, then the first area, the second area, the third area, and the fourth area. The things sold in each area are different. Of course, the most popular place is naturally the open-air street market, which is the place with the most people. Of course, the place that Minister Chin said not to spend more than 100 yuan to buy small things is also here. If it is in those shops, how can there be anything less than 100 yuan? Of course, Jiang Hai and the others are more than just going to take a look. After walking around for a while, everyone bought something. Of course, they were all small toys. For example, Delina, Marion, and the others liked some commemorative medals of their ancestors the most. These things are not expensive, and they are very Huaxia style. They bought a lot of them and are going to give them to the people in the manor when they go back. As for Qi Li and the others, they prefer to buy small bracelets. Although they are all fake, they buy them for fun. The most important thing is that the authenticity of the bracelet is not the thing, but the person wearing it is actually the most important thing. For example, if Qi Li wears a gold-plated bracelet, how can people think that it is gold-plated? Their net worth was there for all to see. Even if it was fake, it was real. Hence, they were only buying things for fun. For example, turquoise, obsidian, and so on. Penelope is a lawyer. To be honest, she has no interest in these things. Because she is too rational, she doesn't buy anything. Azalina came to Huaxia when she was doing a mission before, so she knows that these things are meaningless. Moreover, she has no interest in these things, so she doesn't buy anything. As the backbone of these people, Jiang Hai actually didn't buy anything because he is not very interested in these things. He just came here to take a look. Of course, it is not that he doesn't like anything. There are some things that he likes, such as furniture. I didn't know that wooden furniture is so valuable. Looking at the set of mahogany furniture, the price is 188,888 yuan. Jiang Hai looked at it and couldn't help but laugh. What kind of toy is this? This is still considered cheap. After all, this is just ordinary mahogany, not fine red sandalwood or yellow rosewood. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin also laughed and said, "In recent years, the domestic wooden industry has been very popular. The so-called mahogany is not the same as what the average person knows. Mahogany is divided into two families, Leguminosae and Myrmecae. Leguminosae is divided into two subfamilies, Sphenoideae and Hematoxidae, which are further divided into the genera of red sandalwood, yellow sandalwood, and red bean. The Hematoxidae is the iron knife forest, the red sandalwood is divided into red sandalwood, the yellow sandalwood is divided into fragrant wood, black acid wood, and red acid wood. The Hematoxidae and the persimmon are divided into ebony and ebony. In short, if you don't play with these things, it is difficult to understand what these things are and what they represent. Even if they are all yellow rosewood, the price is very different. The price of South China Sea and South Asia Sea is different. There were a lot of twists and turns in this industry. Therefore, there was no fixed price for wood in the country. A piece of wood, you can sell it for 1 million yuan or 1 yuan, it depends on what the person thinks. Looking at the crazy furniture in China, Zhang Hai can't help but whisper, "Should I go back and get some trees?" Just as Zhang Hai and the others were wandering around, suddenly a figure entered Zhang Hai's sight. It's him. Looking at the swaying figure in front of him, Zhang Hai can't help but be surprised. When Zhang Hai looked at that person also saw Zhang Hai and couldn't help but smile. Obviously, he also recognized Zhang Hai. Chapter 443. Hey brother, what are you doing here? Looking at Zhang Hai, a person walked over with a smile on his face and said with a surprised tone, "Oh, I came over to take a look, but why are you here?" Hearing the man's words, Zhang Hai replied, and then asked curiously, "This is my shop." The man heard Zhang Hai's words and couldn't help but smile and point behind him. As he pointed, Zhang Hai also saw a shop specializing in gems, jade, and the like. Such shops were not rare in the vicinity of Panjiayuan. Zhang Hai saw at least a dozen such shops along the way. But what surprised Zhang Hai was that this fat man said that he was in the jewelry business. Why did he open a shop here? "Hey, I usually import raw materials for those big companies, but I also open a small shop to make some money." Maybe he saw the doubts in Zhang Hai's eyes, the fat man said with a smile. Yes, Zhang Hai knows this fat man. This person is not someone else. He is the fat man named Wang Yang who sat next to Zhang Hai when he came back from the plane. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also nodded and looked at his small shop. He is worthy of being a person who can return to Huaxia in the first-class cabin in the United States without batting an eyelid. Although the location of this fat man's shop doesn't seem to be the best, the area of the shop is not small. At a glance, this shop is at least about 300 square meters in size. There are many display counters in this shop. And the things sold in these counters are all gems. Different from some literary objects, he sells hard goods here. Your shop is not small. Looking at the situation inside, Zhang Hai couldn't help but say with some emotion, "Hey, it's okay. Come in and sit in the shop." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Wang Yang smiled and led Zhang Hai into the shop. But as soon as they walked in, Zhang Hai's originally smiling face instantly turned into a surprised expression. He was not surprised by Fatty Wang's shop, but he was surprised that since he came to Huaxia, his scales, which had almost stopped growing, suddenly accelerated the speed of condensation, as if the spirit between heaven and earth was constantly drilling into his body. This made him very surprised and he couldn't understand what was going on. Although he wanted to explore it, now was not a good time, so he suppressed the doubts in his heart and walked into the shop with Fatty Wang. But his eyes were constantly scanning the things in the shop. He wanted to see where the spirit came from. You know, Zhang Hai is not short of money now. The only things that can make him so excited are only two things. The first is to protect his property, such as buying oil futures, and the second is to increase his strength. The second-level dragon pattern is already quite amazing. Zhang Hai wants to know what it will be like at the third, fourth, and fifth levels in the future. Now the dragon pattern on his body has changed from a snake to a flood dragon. Will it become a dragon next time? What will a dragon become after that? So as soon as he entered the room, Zhang Hai's eyes swept around. He was really curious. Of course, he was not the only one who was curious. Other people besides Minister Qin were also curious. Women always had no resistance to shiny things. As soon as they walked in, their eyes couldn't leave it. Come, 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 brother. Let me introduce you. Seeing that Zhang Hai was very interested in his things, Wang Yang couldn't help but make a gesture in his heart. He called Zhang Hai in to talk and let Zhang Hai see his things. To put it bluntly, he was a businessman. He wanted to sell jade, and Zhang Hai was a very good customer. Okay. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled because he also wanted to know where the spiritual energy came from. So he followed Fatty Wang to the front of these counters. Fatty Wang's things here were indeed very complete. He immediately introduced them to Zhang Hai. His main focus here was the treasure of the store, naturally the 5 precious gems: diamond, ruby, sapphire, beryl, and emerald. But the price of these 5 gems was not cheap. A ring made of emerald could be sold for tens of thousands of yuan. Ordinary people couldn't afford it. These things were just used as signboards. The real thing was actually the other 3 gems: colorful gems, organic gems, and jade. In fact, these 3 gems were the most valuable things here. Come take a look. This is the tourmaline I told you about on the plane. It's beautiful, isn't it? This kind of thing is very popular in our country now. After introducing the 5 precious gemstones, he began to introduce the colored gemstones next to them. The colorful gems were tourmaline. This kind of thing was not very valuable in the past, but now it was very popular. However, Zhang Hai picked up a few pieces and tried them. He was sure that the spiritual energy did not come from them. Although he also liked sparkling things, this thing was not what he wanted. Seeing that Zhang Hai was not interested in tourmaline, Fatty Wang continued to introduce other stones: spinel, topaz, olivine, garnet, crystal, feldspar, tanzanite, pyroxene, cordierite, zircon. But for these stones, Zhang Hai shook his head. He felt that there was no spiritual energy in these stones. It was understandable. After all, when he went to the shipwreck, the pile of gems was not less than here. At that time, he did not feel the acceleration of the spiritual energy, let alone now. After confirming that the spiritual energy was not found by the gems, Zhang Hai looked to the side. Next, Wang Yang introduced organic gemstones. The so-called organic gemstones refer to things formed by animals or plants. They were not real stones. The most famous type of gemstone was coral. In China, the most expensive type of coral was red coral. The price wasn't cheap, but Zhang Hai also made some small discoveries about these red corals. He found that some of these coral products had some spiritual energy, but some did not. It was obvious that if there was spiritual energy, it was real, and if there was no spiritual energy, it was fake. The most important thing was that the spiritual energy was too little, so it could not be absorbed. This was just like the creatures in Zhang Hai's manner. Zhang Hai could inject spiritual energy into them, but he could not absorb it from them. To absorb spiritual energy, he could only rely on the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. That was all. Other than corals, the other things were not too valuable. For example, amber could be artificially made now. However, the really valuable things were left behind tens of thousands or even hundreds of millions of years ago. Amber was actually tree oil. If there was a bug in the tree oil, it was called amber. If there was nothing, it was called beeswax. This thing was also very popular in recent years. A good piece of beeswax was even worth hundreds of thousands. However, this thing was the same as corals. Some of them had spiritual energy, and some of them did not. However, he still could not absorb the spiritual energy. Zhang Hai was very sure that these things were not what he wanted. In addition to amber and beeswax, Zhang Hai also looked at pearls and shells. Of course, shells did not refer to any shells in the sea. They were specifically referring to the giant clam, one of the 8 treasures of Buddhism. However, these 2 things were also the same. They did not have any spiritual energy. Seeing Zhang Hai exclude so many things, Wang Yang was also a little speechless. Just now, he looked at Zhang Hai with some curiosity and thought that he was a big customer. Now, it seemed that he was just curious. After looking at so many things, he had no intention of buying. But as the saying goes, the people in the capital were very prideful. Since he said that he was going to introduce, he had to finish what he started. So Fatty Wang still pushed his smiling face and walked to the last area, which was the jade area. At this time, he no longer had any expectations for Zhang Hai to buy things. He just came over purely as a friend. He came over to show off to his friend. Speaking of jade, the most popular thing now was naturally jade. But to be honest, this thing was the same as a gem in Jiang Hai's eyes. It said that it had spiritual energy, but Jiang Hai did not feel any fluctuation of spiritual energy from it. In other words, Jiang Hai did not know whether it was real or fake when he bought it. For example, Jiang Hai knew whether it was real or fake, but he did not know at all. So he had no interest in jade. After leaping over the largest jade area in the jade area, Wang Yang took out a jade pendant from the cabinet and handed it to Jiang Hai to have a look. He introduced it while he was at it. This is a Hetian. But I won't lie to you. This is not produced in China. Although the quality in China is the best, I can't buy it. This is from Russia. It's a quality of green and white jade. This should have been heavily hyped in the past few years, but it has fallen recently. My stock here has also been suppressed a lot. But fortunately, recently I heard that the Imperial Court is going to apply for this thing to be our national jade. I think there will be some harvest then. Fatty Wang also said with a smile as he stuffed the jade pendant into Jiang Hai's hand. But when Jiang Hai's hand touched this piece of jade, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly lit up. Because he instantly felt that this jade pendant contained a lot of spiritual energy, and the most important thing was that these spiritual energy were slowly entering his body through the contact of his skin. There was not much spiritual energy. The amount of spiritual energy in Jiang Hai's piece was comparable to the spiritual energy in 100 pieces of jade of this size. The reason why Jiang Hai was so shocked was that the spiritual energy in it was not simple spiritual energy. After the spiritual energy entered his body, it actually mobilized other spiritual energy, making them actively run in his body, absorbing the spiritual energy from the outside world at a faster speed. Feeling this, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly turned green. Chapter 444. It has been almost 10 months since Jiang Hai obtained the Dragon Balls. He was very clear that his glory, splendor, wealth, and status in this world depended on it. He could lose everything except for this because this was his root, his everything. So during this time, he was not so concerned about business, nor was he so concerned about women. The only thing he was most concerned about was his spiritual aura. He had been looking for how to make his spiritual aura absorb faster and become stronger. But after searching for a long time, the only thing he found was tea leaves. But the tea leaves could only help Jiang Hai absorb about 1 or 2% more spiritual aura. Of course, if he waited for Jiang Hai's tea tree to be harvested, then his tea leaves would have a better effect. But now he had to wait. He had just planted it this year. If he wanted to harvest it, he had to wait at least until next year around the Qingming festival. Originally, he thought that his spiritual aura was estimated to be like this, and he was preparing to slowly upgrade. Suddenly he found that there was something that could speed up his spiritual aura absorption. Just such a small piece of Hetian jade could increase his spiritual aura absorption speed by about 10%. What if it was a big piece? What if he used this thing to make a room and a bed? Thinking about it, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. Are there any other Hetian jades? Let me see. Seeing this, Jiang Hai took the initiative to talk to Fatty Wang for the first time. Ah, yes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fatty Wang, who had no intention of selling things, was stunned for a moment, and then immediately took out the Hetian jades. He knew that Jiang Hai was not a person who was short of money. Jiang Hai also held these Hetian jades and felt them. According to the color, Hetian jades were divided into white jade, cyan jade, green-white jade, black jade, blue and white jade, jasper jade, topaz jade and sugar jade. Among them, white jade was the most important variety of Hetian jade, and the price was also the most expensive. And in Jiang Hai's hands, indeed, it was expensive for a reason. The most expensive white jade and cyan jade had the best absorption effect. A piece of jade that was almost the size of a palm could increase Jiang Hai's absorption speed by about 11% to 15%. The second was the green-white jade, which was the one just now, which increased it by about 8% to 10%. Then there was the black jade at 5%, the blue jade at 3%, the jasper at 2%, and the topaz at 2%. Jiang Hai could only feel the spiritual aura in the jade, but he could not absorb it. This proved that white jade and cyan jade were the best for Jiang Hai. Putting down these Hetian jades, Jiang Hai didn't feel anxious. Instead, he went to look at the other jades. Opal, fine jade, Dushan jade, Charo stone, Narfeldspar jade, emerald stone, lapis lazuli, malachite, grapestone, fluorite, bloodstone, Shoshan stone, Qingtian stone, different pole ore, sea grain stone, Suji stone. Wang Yang's place was indeed specialized in these things. There were many stones that Zhang Hai had never heard of, but he had them all here. After all, Zhang Hai was just a layman. He was far from being as skilled as Wang Yang. Among these stones, Zhang Hai also found some. The bloodstone, Qingtian stone, and sea grain stone in these jades were all beneficial to his spiritual aura collection. But unfortunately, these spiritual auras were very little, far less than the Hetian jade that gave Zhang Hai a strong feeling. I want this kind of Hetian jade, as long as it is green and white. Raw stones are also fine. I don't know if brother can get it. Touching these Hetian jades in front of him, Zhang Hai asked Fatty Wang. He was really tempted this time. Oh, you want raw stones? Forgive me for asking, but what do you want so much Hetian jade for? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Wang Yang froze for a moment. The imagined excitement did not appear on his face. Instead, he looked at Zhang Hai with some worry. Hee, brother, you don't have to worry too much. I don't plan to enter this industry. I just plan to use this thing to decorate my home. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai said with a smile, and then his eyes began to shine. Decorate? Decorate with this thing? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fatty Wang couldn't help but be a little confused. What's going on? Well, with this equipment, I am going to make my room's walls and floor into this kind of jade. My bed will also be made into this kind of jade. I will also make pillows and a few reclining chairs. Since this kind of jade was beneficial to his advancement, Zhang Hai would not let it go. Is he short of money now? He is not short of money, so he wants to make it the best. Oil futures can be temporarily put aside. This thing is the most important. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Wang Yang, Minister Qin, and even Qi Li were stunned. Is Zhang Hai crazy? Why did he make his home like this? Is he going to sleep on the jade? Doesn't he feel nervous? Zhang Hai. Looking at Zhang Hai, who seems to have lost his mind, Qi Li couldn't help but pull his sleeve. I'm fine. This jade is very useful to me. Brother, just tell me if you can get it. Looking at Wang Yang, Zhang Hai said with a smile, Zhang Hai will not let go of anything that can improve his spiritual aura. Is there a requirement for the place of origin? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fatty Wang was sure that Zhang Hai was not joking with him. If it is true, then it will be a big business, but if Zhang Hai only wants domestic jade, then he can't do anything. Basically, more than 70% of the domestic Hetian jade was taken up by other big businesses. He could only get a little. That was why Fatty Wang expanded more of his business overseas, because there were still a lot of empty markets there. No requirements, but I only want this kind of green jade and white jade. Hearing Fatty Wang's words, Zhang Hai also said seriously. Just now, he tried Hetian jade from different places. In fact, for Zhang Hai, the difference is not big. At present in the world, there are only a few places that produce Hetian jade. In addition to the producing provinces, Huaxia's Qing province, Soviet Russia, Canada, Taiwan province, and nearby Korea and Shu province all produce Hetian jade. However, because of the different places of origin, the price and name are also very different. For example, Soviet Russia is called Russian material. Qing province is called Qing material. The average quality is the best in Xi'an province, but this is just average. After all, there are good and bad everywhere. It is impossible that the worst in this place is better than the best in that place. What's more, what Zhang Hai wants is the best. Like Hetian jade and jade, it is divided into two categories. One is the collection material, which is the jade that has been produced. It can be directly processed or directly collected. This kind of material was naturally very expensive, and the other kind was the processing material. The jadeite was called half-raw stone, which was the stone material that had been picked and confirmed to have the goods inside. The former was naturally the same, and the latter was more or less a gambling element. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fatty Wang has already begun to calculate in his heart. The material that Zhang Hai wants is the best, which is the top-level material. If it is calculated according to Zhang Hai's price, the price is too high. A piece of top-level Hetian jade card is sold here for 65,000 renminbi. The weight is about half a tael, about 25 grams, which is equivalent to 2,600 yuan per gram. This is not carved by a master. Of course, Jiang Hai doesn't want a master to carve it. What he wants is a whole piece of Hetian jade to make a floor, a bed, a pillow, a recliner. There is no need for a master to carve, nor any crafting fee, only the jade money. That kilogram is 2.6 million renminbi. Jiang Hai wants to make a bed. According to the calculation of 2 meters by 2 meters, this bed needs to use at least 50 kilograms of material. Of course, this is counting the price of the legs and the bedboard under the bed, which is made of wood. Only the bed surface and the head of the bed are made of jade. Not counting the crafting fee, it is worth 130 million renminbi. Of course, it can't be sold at the retail price. However, even if a gram is 1,600 yuan, minus 1,000 yuan, the material cost of 50 kilograms is 80 million renminbi. This is just a bed. If you include the recliner and the floor, Fatty Wong can't help but take a breath. It seems that he is going to make a fortune. I want a bed, a big bed, 100 kilograms of material. The floor should be spread all over my room. The size is different, but it must be solid. I also want 3 recliners and 4 pillows. No matter how Fatty Wong calculates, Jiang Hai says what he wants. 100 kilograms of material is 160 million renminbi. The floor in the room, of course, does not include the bathroom and the small living room in his room. Only his room is about 30 square meters. According to the thinner jade material, 1 square meter is 3 kilograms. 30 square meters is about 100 kilograms, which is 320 million renminbi. In addition to the 3 reclining chairs, 1 on the balcony, 1 in the front yard, and 1 in the backyard. Each reclining chair weighs at least 20 kilograms, which makes it 60 kilograms, which makes it 96 million yuan. Altogether, it's 416 million yuan. Even if you round it up and give the pillow to Jiang Hai, and you don't need to pay for the labor, it's still 410 million yuan. Thinking of this, Wang Yang can't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva subconsciously. To be honest, he is a little surprised. Jiang Hai, you have to think about it. This is not a small amount of money. This is a deal worth hundreds of millions. At this time, Minister Qin, who has been listening for a long time, hesitated and said to Jiang Hai. To be honest, he is not very interested in these things. To be honest, he feels that it is unnecessary to spend hundreds of millions of RMB to sleep on jade and step on jade. But he really doesn't understand why Jiang Hai does this. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai just smiled and did not explain more. If that's the case, I'll take a step back. I'll make all of them into top-grade processed white jade. They're collectible. I'm sure you know that you can't afford them. 1 gram costs tens of thousands of yuan. But those stones are the same as these stones. It's just that they're naturally formed and are very valuable. I will give you 1,500 renminbi for 1 gram. According to you, you need at least 250 kilograms of material, which is about 375 million renminbi. It can only be higher than this, not lower. Are you really going to buy it? Chapter 445. Of course, let's sign the contract first, and then I'll send you 100 million renminbi. You can send it to me as soon as possible. Jiang Hai looked at Wang Yang in front of him and said very seriously, 375 million renminbi? This much RMB is equivalent to about 57.9 million US dollars. Jiang Hai has this much cash now, not to mention, this is to help him level up faster. Not to mention spending 300 million renminbi. Even if it costs 3 billion renminbi, he will spend it. After all, this is the foundation of his life in this world. About a month, I can send it to you in about a month. Wang Yang was about to go crazy when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Just now, he just invited Jiang Hai to come over out of courtesy. But he didn't expect to make a business worth hundreds of millions just like that. Although Fatty Wong's business was not small, his annual turnover as a second-hand dealer was less than 10 million. The shop could earn a few million, but these few million would have to be given away at the end of the year. Although Jiang Hai's business will cost him a lot of money, he will at least earn more than 100 million renminbi. This is equivalent to what he earns in 10 years. The most important thing is that after he gets this money, he can do other things. He is really rich, very rich. Okay, 1 month it is. Send these things to the address I've given you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai immediately said with a smile, and immediately asked Penelope to go to the shop next door to print the contract. Wang Yang immediately went to look for his lawyer. Initially, his lawyer was quite arrogant when he came. After confirming that there are no problems with the contract, Jiang Hai and Wang Yang also signed it. Then Jiang Hai first transferred 100 million renminbi to Wang Yang's account. Of course, Wang Yang can also run away with this money. But in this case, the goods, houses, shops etc. in China will all belong to Jiang Hai. These things are worth almost 100 million renminbi. After everything is done, Wang Yang said that he would treat Jiang Hai to a meal, but Jiang Hai has something to do today, so he can only make an appointment tomorrow. After everything is confirmed, Jiang Hai and others left Wang Yang's shop. Of course, before leaving, Wang Yang gave each of them a small thing. The so-called small things were all worth tens of thousands of yuan. Chili got a pair of diamond earrings, Penelope got a ruby necklace, Delina and Marian got a Hatian jade talisman. Azalina got a jade bracelet. Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi originally wanted to choose a ring, but Wang Yang didn't want to waste any more time. Instead, he gave Wang Yang a pair of diamond earrings. Penelope got a ruby necklace, Delina and Marian got a jade talisman. Azalina got a jade bracelet, and Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi originally wanted to choose a ring. But after all, this was a gift from someone else, not bought by Jiang Hai. They can't wear a ring given by another man. So in the end, they each asked for a bracelet, and Jiang Hai casually took a jade token. As for Minister Qin, he is a construction worker. He won't take these things, and he doesn't care about these things. But all in all, everyone is still very happy. Wang Yang sent Jiang Hai and others for a long time before he rushed back to the shop, ready to start working. He will definitely not let go of this business, and who knows if Jiang Hai, this rich man, will still want these things in the future. What if he went crazy one day and decided to turn his own villa into Hatian Yu's? Wouldn't he be in trouble then? After coming out of Wang Yang's shop, Jiang Hai and others are obviously in a good mood. At first, the only one who is a little unhappy is Chili, because Jiang Hai spent hundreds of millions to buy a bunch of useless things. But seeing that Jiang Hai is happy, she didn't say anything. As the saying goes, money can't buy Jiang Hai's happiness. Then, they walked around Panjiayuan and went to look at the street stalls there. Although they didn't get anything useful, Jiang Hai and others unknowingly spent more than 2,000 yuan to buy a bunch of small things. Since they are happy, they don't need to think too much. Seeing that Jiang Hai and others are happy, Minister Qin started to plan in his heart. Just as Jiang Hai thought, this guy indeed has something to do with Jiang Hai. Otherwise, as a dignified deputy minister, he would be crazy to accompany Jiang Hai to have fun. If he wants to show that he cares, he can just send a section chief or a director over. After all, Jiang Hai doesn't have any political status. But now, it seems that he might have to change his purpose. After walking around Panjiayuan, it was already noon. After everyone got back in the car, Minister Qin ordered everyone to go to the Daidu restaurant. This is because they said that they want to eat Tan family's dishes today. And Tan family's dishes are only available in the Daidu restaurant. Tan family's dishes are one of the famous official dishes in Huaxia. It was founded by the family of Tan Zongjuan, a bureaucrat at the end of the Qing dynasty. In 1874, Tan Zongjuan once took the imperial examination and entered the Hanlin Academy as an official. So this dish is also called the imperial examination. There is no branch in the country. Only the Daidu restaurant has such a restaurant. Just like Li family's dishes, it is not something you can eat whenever you want to. Normally, if Jiang Hai and others want to eat, it is impossible to eat without making a reservation in advance. But Minister Qin is not an ordinary person. He was also ordered to come here by the higher-ups, so it is naturally impossible to make a reservation. When Jiang Hai and others arrived, they were already able to eat directly. However, when he opened the menu, Jiang Hai found that he was a little confused. Because the dishes here are indeed a little. A little. Winner's Braised Wing 1688, Throne Seeker 1688, Oolong Stepping in Green 1688, Royal Red Crown Swallow 1688, Garlic Skirt 1688, Three Stewed Blood Swallow 1688, Dragon Armor Removal, Sea Cucumber, 1688, Premium Dry Leaning Shrimp 1688, First Grade Steamed Tofu 1688, Yam Vegetable Pancake 1688. Looking at this list of dishes, Zhang Hai felt that he was really too naive. These ingredients are not very bad, but they are not particularly good either. There is no top-notch Asiatic wing or top-notch two-headed abalone, but they are sold for $16.88. It is up to you to eat it or not. This is no longer a problem of cheating foreigners. This is a problem of cheating foreigners to death. Zhang Hai did some calculations in his heart. 4 people like them, if they ate until they were full, it would be difficult for them to leave this restaurant without 30,000 or 50,000 yuan. Fortunately, Minister Qin was paying the bill today, so Zhang Hai wouldn't be polite. Minister Qin was also very calm. Although the imperial court did not allow public funds to be used to eat and drink, this was still money that needed to be spent. After all, Zhang Hai had helped the imperial court solve a big problem. Minister Qin was also very calm. After all, Zhang Hai helped the imperial court solve a big problem. Therefore, he does not need to spend this money. Soon, the dishes that Zhang Hai ordered were all served. In fact, it is not only Zhang Hai's first time here, but also Chili and others' first time here. After all, very few people would treat people here. If you go to an ordinary seafood restaurant, what can you eat for tens of thousands of yuan? The lobsters are as big as you want, the abalones are as many as you want, and the sea cucumbers are as long as you want. It is not like here, where the stingy dishes are so expensive. Therefore, after seeing the price of these dishes, they are secretly speechless. Even if the price is changed to dollars, these things are too expensive. How can a dish cost nearly $300? This is like eating gold bars. However, when the dishes were served, Zhang Hai was quite satisfied. At least it didn't look bad, and it smelled very good. Out of curiosity, he also took a bite with his chopsticks, but this bite made Zhang Hai immediately narrow his eyes. Delicious. There was really nothing much to say. It was indeed delicious, truly delicious. Every dish had its own unique taste, which was very much in line with Zhang Hai's taste buds. Not only could the original taste of the ingredients be magnified infinitely in his mouth, but the juice that was concocted was also indescribably fresh. This might be the secret of the school's dishes that were not passed on. That is why it is so valuable. This kind of taste was purely due to the chef's craftsmanship. It couldn't be stimulated by the original taste of the ingredients. Even if the ingredients had brought out 120% of the taste, it still wouldn't work. This dish was purely made with the chef's craftsmanship. If the raw materials of these dishes are not even a fraction of 688 yuan, then the chef's craftsmanship is worth 1,000 yuan. Of course, with Zhang Hai's personality, although he likes to eat this kind of food, it is destined that he will never come here without an invitation in the future. The meal is quite enjoyable. Anyway, Minister Qin does not need to spend money, so he is very happy to eat. After lunch, they stepped into the car again, but this time, they are going to the suburbs. Where are we going? The Great Wall? We have already been there. Looking at the road ahead, Zhang Hai hesitated for a moment and said to Minister Qin. To be honest, he already feels very good today. Not only did he buy Hetian Jade, but he also had such a meal at noon. The taste of the school's cooking is very good, so he is looking forward to the taste of the Li family's cooking in the evening. Now, seeing the car driving further and further away, although he is not afraid, he is still thinking about the Li family's cooking. He does not want to be unable to eat it when the time comes. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin also said with a smile, "Don't worry, you will definitely like it there. Didn't you say that you want to bring some excellent ingredients from our country to the United States? This time, you can choose whatever you want." Hearing that, Zhang Hai's eyes suddenly lit up. He is indeed very interested in these things. What is the most troublesome thing in the United States? That is, he can't eat the taste of his hometown, although this time, Xiaoya came to his hometown. However, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Some things can't be made just because you know how to cook. Some ingredients can be replaced, but some can't. This is a very simple problem. So Zhang Hai is going back this time. Since it is convenient, he is going to bring more things back. In addition to the 3 kinds of fish, other things are indispensable. Chapter 446. The car quickly drove out of the capital. Of course, the capital's urban area was very large, unlike Ice City. Although it was the largest city in the inland, only smaller than Fog City, but Fog City was next to the Yangtze River. The urban area was particularly small. Out of the city center, it was basically the urban-rural fringe. Further north, even some villages could be considered as part of Ice City. Although the capital's area was not as large as Ice City, the urban area was much larger. After all, Ice City had not even filled up the area between the 2nd and 3rd Ring Road, but the capital had already filled up the 5th Ring Road. However, this time, Zhang Hai and the others did not go to the 5th Ring Road, but out of the 5th Ring Road. According to Zhang Hai's estimation, it was better to say that this was Ji Province than the capital. However, the people here were still using the capital's ID cards. Fortunately, they did not drive to Ji Province. In front of Zhang Hai and the others, a huge building complex appeared. As the car drove over, Zhang Hai saw a banner hanging at the main entrance. It was a warm celebration of the victory of the 17th National Agricultural Products Sales Conference. Seeing this, Zhang Hai's eyes could not help but light up. Agricultural Products Sales Conference. What Zhang Hai wanted to buy, in addition to those expensive things, were the local specialties of Hedi. Originally, he thought that he would have to go to these places one by one, but he did not expect that he would be able to do this in the capital. I don't know much about the things inside. I've already arranged for someone to accompany you. When you see anything you like, just tell me. How much do you want? I'll give you the price according to the purchase price. Seeing that Zhang Hai was really interested, Minister Qin also said this with a smile. It seemed that he was not going to accompany Zhang Hai in. Then I'll have to trouble you, Minister Qin. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai did not insist on his company. He smiled and led everyone out of the car. Sure enough, as soon as they got out of the car, there was already a middle-aged man waiting for Zhang Hai. Hello. Are you Mr. Zhang? My name is Sun Yuan. You can call me Old Sunday. Let me introduce you to the things inside. As soon as he saw Zhang Hai get out of the car, the middle-aged man walked over enthusiastically and said with a friendly face, "Then, Old Sun, let's go in." Zhang Hai glanced at the car behind him and said with a smile. He then followed Sun Yuan into the hall in front of him. Minister Qin, who was in the car, took out his phone and made a call. Yes, just as Zhang Hai thought, Minister Qin was indeed looking for Zhang Hai because he had something to discuss with Zhang Hai. Although Hua Xia and the United States were not complete enemies, they still saw each other as their biggest threat. Now that Zhang Hai helped the imperial court solve the oil problem, the imperial court was thinking that it seemed that Zhang Hai's influence in the United States was not small. He even knew Du Feimin. Could they develop Zhang Hai and make him a spy for the imperial court? At the very least, his manor could become a hiding place for their other spies and agents. Of course, the imperial court also knew that if you talked to Zhang Hai about patriotism, politics, and self-sacrifice, Zhang Hai would not even listen. Why would he risk his family's destruction to help the imperial court offend the American government in the United States? If this was discovered, his manor would be destroyed in an instant. Therefore, it was precisely because of this that Minister Qin came to accompany Zhang Hai. In fact, he was also testing Zhang Hai. In this world, the imperial court believed that no one was airtight. Zhang Hai must have a weakness, and the first thing that came to their mind was money. They had also done a simple investigation on Zhang Hai. They thought that Zhang Hai could not make much money. After all, Zhang Hai raised cows. If it were not for the fact that the cows he raised were too good, the price would not have been very high. They really couldn't be sold at a high price. An adult cow in the United States was only around $10,000 on average. 20,000 cows were indeed worth $200 million, but there were taxes, labor, drinks, and so on. One cow was only around $6,000 on average. After deducting the $5,000 needed to buy the cow, one could only make around $1,000 per cow. 20,000 cows were worth $20 million. Converted into RMB, it was more than $120 million. The imperial court thought that if they directly gave Zhang Hai $1 billion or $800 million, would Zhang Hai agree? Of course, the imperial court would not spend more than that. After all, it was just a location. There was no need to spend more than $10 billion. However, after seeing Zhang Hai by the Hatian Jade today, Minister Qin knew that this idea might not work. Zhang Hai spent $400 million just to renovate his own room. That meant that Zhang Hai's net worth was at least $400 million. $1 billion or $800 million would not be enough to satisfy Zhang Hai. Money was not enough, and Zhang Hai did not need the privileges in the country. He was not interested in entering the bureaucracy. He had many beautiful women around him. He did not lack women. Money, power, and women. Zhang Hai did not lack these three things. In that case, the imperial court really did not have anything to offer. As he thought of this, Minister Qin's attitude gradually changed. Otherwise, he would have followed them in. But now, Zhang Hai did not care. If he did not say anything, Zhang Hai did not need to refuse. It was simple. Regardless of what Minister Qin and the higher-ups said, Zhang Hai had already walked into the hall. However, as soon as he walked in, he could not help but exclaim. This hall was really big. It was about 20,000 square meters. It could be even bigger. Huaxia had a total of 34 provincial administrative regions. This place was also divided into 34 parts. At this time, many businessmen were wandering around the major regions, looking for opportunities to cooperate. This place was not open to the public. In other words, ordinary tourists could not enter. This place was specially prepared for the businessmen in the land. Of course, there were not only plant specialties, but also animal specialties. Sun Yuan came in with Zhang Hai. As soon as he walked in, many people took the initiative to greet him. It seemed that Sun Yuan's status here was not low. It was understandable. Although Minister Qin did not accompany Zhang Hai still enjoyed Sun Yuan's status. Our agricultural products fair was specially approved by the higher-ups in 1997. It was suspended in 2008 for the purpose of sharing local specialties and resources. Therefore, you can find almost all the products in the country here. Everything that can be found in the local market can be found here. Let's look around as we walk. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan greeted the others and smiled. While leading Zhang Hai and the others inside, he introduced them. The first thing that entered Zhang Hai's eyes were the specialties of several major municipalities. Although municipalities were provincial in name, to be honest, after all, no matter how big a city was, it was just a city. It could not be compared with a province, even if it had an advantage in administrative level. The first thing that Zhang Hai saw were the several booths in the capital. The booths in the capital did not have many things. Roast duck, various pastries, pickles from liu-biju, bamboo shoots, dates, and so on. But to be honest, there was nothing that attracted Zhang Hai. The only thing that attracted Zhang Hai was the instant boiled mutton, but unfortunately, this mutton was not a specialty of the capital. It was from Mongolia. The booths in Shanghai did not have much. Most of them were pastries, but there were two things that interested Zhang Hai. Saffron and 9 caddies of yellow. Yes, saffron was not a specialty of Tibet. It was from Shanghai. It was just that this thing was called saffron. More than 90% of the saffron in the country was produced in Shanghai. Therefore, this was the main production area. 9 caddies of yellow was also called pudong chicken. Because an adult rooster could grow more than 9 hens, it was also called 9 caddies of yellow. As one of the 3 largest chickens in the country, only the Langshan chicken could be compared with it. Zhang Hai was very interested in these two things. After remembering it in his heart, Zhang Hai continued to walk inside. The exhibition hall behind Shanghai was in Tianjin City. Tianjin City was also one of the municipalities. There were a lot of specialties. The most famous steamed buns, pear, fried dough twists, and radishes, also known as sand nest radishes, are known throughout the country for their crispness and sweetness. This time, Zhang Hai wanted to get some of these things back to grow. After all, there were too few vegetables in the United States. Next was Fog City. But to be honest, the things in Fog City overlapped with those in Sichuan. For example, some tea, hot pot, etc. They were basically the same, so Zhang Hai did not look at them carefully. After the 4 municipalities, it was time for the other provinces. Yes, Huaxia had a total of 4 municipalities. The famous Shenzhen city was a special economic zone, but it was not a municipality. If Zhang Hai did not come here, he would not understand. After the 4 municipalities, it was time for the 3 eastern provinces. The specialties of the 3 eastern provinces were also quite overlapping. Zhang Hai was from Bing City, so he naturally knew that the specialties of Liao province were also found in Ji province and Heilong province. The only thing that they did not have was seafood. However, Zhonghai did not lack seafood. What Ji province had, Heilong province and Liao province also had. What Heilong province had, the other two provinces also had. The only special thing was the specialties of Xing and territory. For example, the locust fish and flying dragon mentioned before. But Zhonghai did not lack these things. He walked around the exhibition hall and was interested in a lot of things. But he could not raise most of them. The fungus in the northeast was the best in the world. But the problem was that he did not know how to raise them. The mushrooms here were also the best in the world. But it was still the same problem. He did not know how to raise them. Ginseng was also the best in the world. How can Changbai ginseng and other ginseng be compared? But it was still the same problem. He did not know how to raise them. So, after looking around, he wanted a lot of things, but there were not many things that he could buy. But when he was about to walk through the exhibition hall of the three provinces, he suddenly saw something. Rice. Seeing the rice, Zhonghai did not know why, but he swallowed his saliva subconsciously. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, rice. He said that after going to the US, something was missing. Growing rice seemed to be a good idea. Chapter 447. Those who had lived overseas would know that rice can be found in supermarkets in Europe and the US. But Europeans and Americans do not buy much rice. They were more used to eating pasta, which was bread and the like, but Asians preferred to eat rice. When it comes to rice, there are three major rice-producing areas in the world. The rice produced in these three areas is the best. Of course, rice is also divided into different grades and types. Ordinary hybrid rice can only fill one's stomach. The worst rice produced in these three areas is Korean rice. Huasia's rice is in the middle and Japan's rice is the best. But Japan is only a small place. That's why the amount of rice produced there is limited, and it is very expensive. It's hard to imagine that a bowl of rice with a Japanese electric cooker can be sold for dozens of RMB. It's hard to understand. As for the rice in China, there were two places that were recommended. One was Hailong Changwu City, and the other was Liao Province's Jinpan. In the beginning, the rice in Jinpan was specially provided. But later, because Liao Province was an industrial province, the land was heavily polluted. As a result, Liao Province's rice gradually lost its original glory, while Heilong Province, which had always been China's granary, suddenly emerged as a new force to be reckoned with. For many years, it had been the country's #1 grain producer. Just the grain produced in one season was enough to feed the entire country for 3 months. The quality of the rice produced is also second to none. Of course, this also depends on the original rice. Pearl rice is sold in supermarkets all over the country. This type of rice is also the most produced in the Northeast. But to be honest, this type of rice is sold in the villages. If it is not sold, it will be used to feed the chickens. People rarely eat this type of rice. Of course, when the new rice is harvested, they will eat some of it. But it is not the main food. People like Zhonghai and the rest of the people in Bing City eat Daohuaxiang rice. This type of rice is very expensive in the south. Kofco's Daohuaxiang rice is sold for more than 80 renminbi per 10 kilograms bag. This is only the worst variety of Daohuaxiang rice. If it is a good variety, it will be sold for more than 10 renminbi per 500 kilograms. In the local area, this rice was only sold for about 3 to 4 renminbi. The better ones were sold for about 6 renminbi. In the south, the price would be doubled. But after going abroad, the price was not only doubled, it was 6 times. Zhonghai bought rice in Winthrop. Korean rice cost $21 per kilogram. Northeastern rice cost $18 per kilogram, and Japanese rice cost $32 per kilogram. Although the taste of Korean rice was not as good as Northeast rice, it was more expensive than Northeast rice. However, looking at the price, it was really a little painful. It was $18 a kilogram, which was $9 a caddy. It was more than $50 a caddy. Fortunately, Zhonghai didn't lack money. But before he saw it, he didn't care. Now that he suddenly saw this type of rice, Zhonghai's brain became active. He specially called Robbins to ask if anyone in his family knows how to grow rice. The result was that no one knows how to grow rice. But it wasn't difficult to grow. After all, America was all about machines, so it wasn't difficult to grow them. Moreover, Winthrop had abundant water resources, so it wasn't difficult to grow rice and other things. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also made a purchase list of rice in his heart. But it is destined not to be planted this year. It is already June. He missed the planting time. Winthrop and Huaxia's northeast temperature are about the same. So he has to wait until next year to plant. But this year, Zhang Hai can buy a batch to eat. This is the most important thing. In Mongolia there are a lot of things. Zhang Hai has been coveting Ujimkin sheep for a long time. This kind of sheep is best for mutton soup. It is much better than boar goat. Zhang Hai naturally wants to buy this. There was also the German donkey from Lu province. Dragon meat in the sky. Donkey meat on the ground. Zhang Hai also wanted to see if the donkey he raised was as delicious as the flying dragon. In addition to donkey meat, there is also pork. There is also pork in the United States, but it is too little, and the taste is also ordinary. After all, pork is not an indispensable dish on the American table, so there are not many people who buy it. Naturally, there are not many people who raise it. Since Zhang Hai wants to buy this time, he also wants to bring some pigs back. The pig he chose is the Jiangxiang pig. This is a national second-class protected breed. It is the best pig in the country. It is only produced in the Jiangxiang Yuelyang district of your province. This kind of pig is a kind of miniature pig. Its weight rarely exceeds 30 kilograms. It can be raised as a pet pig. Of course, the best way is to eat meat, especially roasted meat. The taste is really good. Other than these food, Zhang Hai also wants to buy a lot of tea trees. These tea trees are good for his absorption of spiritual qi. It is not like the time when he asked Elder Zhang for tea trees. Now, Zhang Hai can get as many tea trees as he wants. There are only a few tea trees in his house. Although they are all alive and growing well, it is not easy to get them. But to be honest, it is not easy to get tea leaves. The amount of tea leaves that can be picked from each tea tree is very small. When the tea trees are gathered together, Fengyu has to drink them carefully. He does not dare to brew too much tea. But it does not matter now. He can bring back 100 to 80 tea trees. If he wants to drink Longjing tea, he can drink Shuya tea. If he wants to drink Taiping tea, he can drink Taiping tea. After walking around here for more than 3 hours, Zhang Hai also listed the things he wants to buy. Of course, this is only what he wants to buy now. If he thinks of something in the future, he will buy again. Anyway, the imperial court allowed him to take these things away. In addition to the 3 kinds of fish he wants at the beginning, he wants 209 kilogram yellow chickens, 200 Wolf Mountain chickens, and 100 kilograms of saffron bulbs, which is the plant of this thing, which is 50 kilograms. He is going to plant these flower stalks behind his villa. Of course, this thing is very popular recently. It is said that animals are not allowed to eat it. But in fact, it is all nonsense. Nothing will happen to animals if they eat it. In addition to the flower stalks, there are also the seeds of sand nest radish. This kind of thing is originally a protected species, but Sun Yuan agreed with Zhang Hai with a smile. There are 1,000 Ujimkin sheep. Zhang Hai has eaten this kind of sheep before. It is really delicious. So now he can't wait to see what these sheep will become in his pasture. There are 20 German donkeys. This kind of meat donkey has no market in the United States, unlike the Ujimkin sheep. Even if he does not eat it, robins and the others will still eat it. But donkeys and horses are not eaten in the United States. So, he basically raises them for his family to eat, so he does not need too many. There are 100 Jiangxiang pigs. Zhang Hai is still very interested in this kind of small pig. Most importantly, Americans also eat pork. The most important thing is the rice with the fragrance of the rice flour. However, the current rice can only be planted for 1 season. Zhang Hai is not too concerned about this. He will come back to buy next year. The Americans are still quite open. After roughly ordering these things here, Zhang Hai also paid the deposit. Although Zhang Hai bought a lot of things, in fact, the things themselves are not worth much. The most valuable thing is actually the transportation. If he wants to transport these live animals to the United States, it is definitely impossible to take a plane. By the time he takes a plane, more than half of these animals will die first. Then, he can only take a boat. It is close to a month, plus the transportation of the boat and the consumption of their feed. These are all money. However, Zhang Hai is not too concerned about this. It is not like he has no money. So, Zhang Hai first transferred 1 million yuan to this person called Sun Yuan. Everything will be left to him. If there is more money, it will all be his. If there is not enough money, Zhang Hai will compensate him. It is that simple. As for the 3 types of fish that Zhang Hai wanted at the beginning, Sun Yuan also told him about it. The current situation is not too ideal. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan said to Zhang Hai, "Mr. Zhang, the 3 types of fish you want, Minister Qin has already instructed. I have also coordinated. The large yellow croakers are not difficult to get. We can send them to you directly. Together with these animals, we will charge you $8 for each fry. This is also the intention of the higher-ups." $8? Then let's start with 3 million. Listening to this price, it is really cheap. In fact, what Zhang Hai does not know is that the reason why the large yellow croakers he ate that day are so expensive is that they are wild. The yellow croakers raised by this family are only about $40 or $50. There is a huge difference in price. However, Zhang Hai does not care, because the fish he raises are wild, even wilder than the wild ones. This is also his secret. Upon hearing Zhang Hai's words, Sun Yuan's heart skipped a beat. Originally, he thought that this time's business was just a small one, $1 million or so deal. He didn't think that Zhang Hai would directly ask for 3 million fish. Sun Yuan's heart skipped a beat. $8 for 1 tail, 3 million for 1 tail, that is 24 million yuan. He can also make a lot of money from this. This is not a problem. After all, Minister Qin has spoken, so we can give you some. At most, we can get you 100,000 fish. The price of each fish is $70. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan carefully said. When Zhang Hai opened his mouth and said 3 million taels, Sun Yuan was scared silly. This time he didn't even say you, but you. 70? I will pay 80 for 1 tail. Let's see if we can get more. Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. In fact, Zhang Hai's main goal is the Yangtze River swordfish. 100,000 fish is really not enough. Moreover, he is confident that he can make these fish grow fast and wild, and adapt to his manner. This is where his confidence lies. This I have to ask, but we can't bring these fish to you. You have to see and talk to them in person. Finally, there is the Chinese bahaba fish. We have already sent people to catch it at the estuary, but now there is only 1 fish. It may take some time to get 8 fish. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan whispered. Chapter 448. In the hotel room, Feng Yunchen's voice came intermittently. On the big bed, the battle between Zhang Hai, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi continued. In the afternoon, when everyone left the agricultural trade center, it was already past 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then, everyone took a car and went to the legendary Li family's restaurant. However, the Li family's restaurant was basically not much different from the Tan family's restaurant. The taste was really good, but the ingredients could only be considered okay. It was good to scare foreigners, but people in the country did not like it. Unlike the Tan family's restaurant, the Li family's restaurant did not allow people to order. Here, it was a set of dishes, and they could eat whatever was served. Even with Minister Qin following them, Zhang Hai and the others came according to the restaurant's requirements. After eating a delicious dinner, everyone returned to the hotel. After Minister Qin sent Zhang Hai and the others here, he took the initiative to leave. He did not look for Zhang Hai to tell him his purpose. Zhang Hai was also happy to be free. After Minister Qin left, Qili took the initiative to leave with Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. For her, although she knew the relationship between Zhang Hai and them, she could not stay here. But he couldn't just watch them live here, and it seemed that Zhang Hai didn't have any intention of letting him stay. Since she couldn't get what she couldn't get, she didn't want others to get it easily. That was why Qili left with them. After sending them home, she didn't expect the 2 of them to take a taxi back. When the 3 of them met, it was naturally like lightning striking fire. Zhang Hai had not done this for a long time. Last time, he vaguely remembered that something bad happened with Selena Gomez. Since then, He had been relying on his left and right hand to live. So much so that he felt that his hand had a tendency to decline a little. As for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, since they came back, they naturally kept their chastity for Zhang Hai. In certain aspects, women would also think about things. Because of this, after the three of them met, there was no need to say much. The clothes disappeared in less than a minute, and then the battle began. After a full 3 hours, it was already midnight, and the battle came to an end. With Zhang Hai's physique that was twice as strong as a human's, he was able to fight 1 against 2 and win in the end. However, he was also very tired. With his physical fitness, it was not a very common thing to be covered in sweat. As for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, they were already like 2 piles of mud, unable to exert any strength. Looking at the sweat stains on their bodies, Zhang Hai carried them up and went to the hotel's jacuzzi. After filling the tub with water and changing the bed sheets, Zhang Hai carried them to lie in the jacuzzi. Feeling the impact of the water in the bathtub, Zhang Hai couldn't help but let out a long breath. This feeling was really great. How long are you going to stay this time? Leaning on Zhang Hai's chest, Feng Yunqin asked slowly. The day has passed, and they haven't found a chance to talk to Zhang Hai. I don't know, now that everything is almost done. Maybe I will leave soon. What about you? Have you thought about it? Do you want to go with me? Tightening his arms, Zhang Hai asked them. We haven't thought about it yet, because we don't know what identity we will be going to you with. Burying her head on Zhang Hai's shoulder, Feng Yunqin laughed at herself, and then said slowly. Hearing her words, Ai Xiaoxi on the other side also tightened her arms. As for Zhang Hai, his body trembled slightly, because he didn't know what to say now. As the mistress? That's obviously impossible. It's not that Zhang Hai is ruthless, but now that he is married to Qili, it's impossible for him to welcome the new mistress so blatantly. But if it's not as the mistress, what identity will it be? With other identities, Zhang Hai wouldn't be embarrassed, but what about them? Now, for the first time, Zhang Hai felt that all those harem novels and stallion novels that he had read before were all lies. Why would a woman be so loyal to a man after doing that with him? How much hatred can be wiped away with a smile? People are selfish. Zhang Hai wants to possess them, and they also want to possess Zhang Hai, but they know that they can't. It's precisely because of this that they have some entanglements, and this book has never had a mistress. I just hope that you can stay by my side so that I can take care of you, and you don't have so much pressure, but identity not now, in the future. Shaking his head, Zhang Hai said hesitantly. In the future. We'll talk about it in the future. If you have the heart, stay with us for a while. By the way, didn't you say you were going to Su Province in the afternoon? Just in time, we're going to Shanghai in a few days. Let's go together. Patting Zhang Hai's chest, Feng Yunqin said with a smile. In fact, she was just a little emotional just now. The moment she decided to be with Zhang Hai, she knew that in this life, she might not be able to wear a wedding dress and receive blessings from her family. Zhang Hai is a wild horse. If you fall in love with this guy, then you have to be mentally prepared. She's not young anymore. She and Zhang Hai are the same age. If she can stay by Zhang Hai's side, it should be not bad. As for Ai Xiaoxi, whether she still has a trace of longing or not, it has nothing to do with her. Because she knows that Ai Xiaoxi has the qualifications, but she doesn't. Feng Yunqin glanced at the girl who was also lying on Zhang Hai's body and glanced at her. What are you going to Shanghai for? Hearing Feng Yunqin's words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear that they were going to Shanghai. Besides, what are they going to Shanghai for? He really didn't understand. We're going to Shanghai to participate in CJ. We're models, we have to rely on this to make a living. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi also smiled and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. That thing, didn't it start at the end of June? It should be the end of July, the plot requires the end of June, parallel space. It's only the beginning of June now, what are you going to do? Looking at Ai Xiaoxi, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. He used to be a shut-in, kind of a shut-in. After all, he didn't have much to do, so naturally, he also has a soft spot for the exhibition. CJ, also known as China Joy, its full name is Huaxia International Digital Interactive Entertainment Exhibition. At the beginning, The purpose of the exhibition was to give those game developers a stage to show themselves. But later, it slowly changed a little. It was now a competition of who could find the prettier TV girls, who wore less, and who was more ruthless, rather than a competition of the quality of the game. It was precisely because of this that some small game developers who made a lot of money here won a lot of attention and made a lot of money. Every year at this time, Shanghai will also refresh the pictures on the internet to see the benefits and so on. But later, those big game developers couldn't sit still, for example, Penguin. Although Penguin games can't be played without money. But after all, Penguin is still the #1 game developer in Huaxia. If they continue to play like this, their advantage will disappear. So in the past 2 years, they have also introduced a new policy that no longer allows the 3 vulgarities. Last year it was really good and it was quite tight. But there is no topic, even Shanghai, a fan of universal love, doesn't watch it, which means that there is really no one watching it. So this year, there is news that it should be appropriately relaxed, and it can't be as vulgar as before, but it can't be without a topic. However, Shanghai is already in the United States at this time, and he doesn't feel anything about this news. We don't need to sign a contract, we don't need to try on clothes, we don't need to walk on the stage. It is indeed opening on the 30th, but we need to prepare in advance. It will take about half a month to prepare in advance. Hearing Shanghai's words, Feng Yunchen rolled her eyes at him. Is money so easy to earn? Even if it is a car exhibition, you have to prepare in advance. How to take photos with these cars, make expressions, and pose, these all need to be carefully planned. For example, most of the showgirls in CJ don't just go up and show off and pose for a while. They still need to perform some things, such as singing, dancing, and so on. They also need to know how to play the products they endorse. They can't be ignorant. It is precisely because of this that they need to go in advance and learn some things first. Especially when it came to learning how to dance, they had to practice for a period of time. Although they didn't practice dancing for the sake of debuting, it was like a group of girls who practiced hundreds or even thousands of times. However, they couldn't be too bad. After all, the manufacturers spend money not to let them make a fool of themselves. It is precisely because of this that they need to go in advance. Hearing Feng Yunchen's explanation, Shanghai also nodded, and at the same time, he calculated in his heart. Then let's go together when the time comes. After thinking for a moment, Shanghai smiled and said to Feng Yunchen. In any case, he was going to the Su province. The Su province was near Shanghai. Shanghai, Zhejiang province, and the Su province, these 3 places were close to each other. Usually, when they go there to play, they would go there together. Since they were going to Shanghai, then Shanghai might as well take Delina and the others to the Zhejiang province. The Su province was also a good place to play. Most importantly, he would be able to meet them more. Shanghai was a bit surprised. Really? That's great. Hearing that Shanghai is going with them, AI Xiaoxi also shouted excitedly. In fact, to be honest, in the beginning, Feng Yunchen and AI Xiaoxi didn't really want to go to CJ. Not to mention that it is tiring, the money is not much. They don't lack this money now, and the most important thing is that it is easy to be targeted by some rich people, which is very disgusting. The only advantage is that there is exposure. This is also something that they can't ignore, so they can only be careful. But now, Shanghai said that he wants to go with them, so they are relieved. Even if they don't go to work, it is good to go to play. Chapter 449. Shanghai, also known as Shanghai or Shen, was once the most popular city in Huaxia during the previous dynasty. Of course, it was so powerful at that time, not because of the imperial court of the previous dynasty, but because of the concessions here. Speaking of which, these concessions, in the eyes of Shanghai's generation, may be the shame of Huaxia at that time. The national strength was weak, so there were things like concessions. However, it was also because of these concessions that Shanghai laid the foundation of an international metropolis at that time. After the current imperial court was in power, Shanghai's development was still very fast. Now, Shanghai had faintly become the 2nd largest city in Huaxia, second only to the existence of the imperial capital. Many international brands set their headquarters in Shanghai, which was also a symbol of national strength. This was the first time Shanghai came to Shanghai. Although he had been to the United States many times, Shanghai was the first time he came. After solving the matter in the imperial capital, Jiang Hai stayed in the imperial capital for a few more days. During these days, Qili would come over every day to be with Jiang Hai and the others. Gradually, Jiang Hai and the others also got used to the existence of this woman. Although in Jiang Hai's heart, he was still narrow-minded, he still couldn't let go of how Qili treated him in the past. Although he wasn't a resentful woman in the boudoir, he was still narrow-minded. He didn't have such a broad heart to forgive Qili for what she did in the past. However, now that Jiang Hai was rushing to get close to her, he was really not used to it. His attitude towards her was also slightly eased. In the next few days in the imperial capital, every day during the day, they either stayed in the hotel or went out for a walk. Although there were no scenic spots to go to, they still lived quite happily. In the evening, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi also came over to be with Jiang Hai. The life of the three people was still very happy. After a few happy days in the imperial capital, it was also the day for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi to go to Shanghai. After Jiang Hai also told Qili, everyone left the imperial capital. Although Qili also wanted to go, unfortunately, she still needed to keep an eye on the Qi group here. Therefore, only Jiang Hai, Feng Yunqin, Ai Xiaoxi, Penelope, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian sat in the first-class cabin on the flight from the imperial capital to Shanghai, because the two places were not too far away. The flight was still very fast, a little over 2 hours. The plane had already landed in Shanghai and Dongpu Airport. As soon as they got off the plane, the Four Seasons hotel that Jiang Hai had already booked had sent 2 commercial cars to pick up Jiang Hai and the others. Originally, Jiang Hai and the others did not have much luggage. Even if they bought some in the imperial capital, it was not a lot. However, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi's luggage was quite a lot. Just the underwear and makeup products had already occupied half of the suitcase. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Of course, these so-called makeup products were more for maintenance. They were not contestants with heavy makeup, nor were they existences that would die in the light. Jiang Hai had seen them without makeup before. After getting off the plane, they sat in 2 cars. Jiang Hai, Feng Yunqin, and Ai Xiaoxi were in one car. Azalina, Penelope, Daliana, and Marian were in the other car. Jiang Hai booked a total of 4 suites in the hotel, and they stayed as they were originally. As for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, they were staying at Jiang Hai's place tonight. They would go to the dormitory tomorrow. Although it was only a collective training, it was still training after all. So after signing the contract, they needed to eat and live with the other girls for half a month. They could only leave after CJ ended. Of course, in addition to sleeping time at night, if they had other time, they could also come to Jiang Hai. After arriving at the hotel, everyone had a good night's rest. The next day, Jiang Hai and the others accompanied Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi to sign the contract. Then, everyone decided to play in Shanghai together. The company that Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi signed the contract with was also a top company in the country. Jiang Hai did not know the specific name. He had not played games for a long time. He heard that this time, their company showed a total of 3 games and also signed 3 groups of SG players. When he saw Penelope, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian, the person in charge wanted to sign them, but he was rejected by Jiang Hai. After signing the contract, everyone went to the nearby area to play. To be honest, if it was a normal young person, Shanghai actually had a lot of fun, such as bars, nightclubs, some big shopping malls, and so on. It was an international city. But for Jiang Hai, it seemed that Shanghai did not have as many fun places as the imperial capital. The imperial capital had the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, the Summer Palace, Fragrant Hill, Ho Hai, and so on. Although he did not have much interest in it, it was still a good place to play. As for Shanghai, to be honest, Jiang Hai looked at the map and really did not know what was there to play. There was a TV tower and a leftover stadium of the World Expo. When he saw the TV tower on the Bund, he saw all of it. Other than that, there was nothing else to play with. Jiang Hai was not interested in buildings, science and technology museums, financial centers, and so on. If he came alone, he might go in and have a look. It was not very convenient to bring a group of women with him. Therefore, after a simple look around Shanghai, Jiang Hai and the others only stayed for 3 to 4 days before leaving. Although Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi were not professional dancers, they had started learning after all, so they had to be more attentive. They also did not have time to accompany Jiang Hai and the others. They left together and focused on preparing for CJ. As for Jiang Hai and the others, they continued south and went to other places to play. They first went to Hang City to see the legendary West Lake. But to be honest, West Lake was a big name, but when you really went to play, you would feel that it was a bit of a trap. For example, if you built a pond to raise some fish, it would be called a scenery. If you built a small bridge, it would be called a broken bridge. 18 miles was actually a very short bridge. It was called 18 miles because it was sent back and forth. If you put 3 stone altars in the water, it would also be called a scenery. Of course, there were historical stories and allusions, especially those romantic stories. For example, Su Xian and the White Snake, Liang Shanhua and Zhu Yingtai. Liang Shanhua had 105 brothers and 3 sisters. They specialized in robbing landlords and enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. They even attacked Zhu Yingtai's hometown, the Zhu family manor, 3 times. This enmity was irreconcilable. How could the two of them be together? It seemed like he had mixed up the books. But no matter what, Jiang Hai might not have liked this kind of elegant atmosphere. This could be seen from the animals he raised. In addition to the front teeth, he preferred powerful creatures, not cute ones. Therefore, he was naturally not interested in romantic love stories. He only liked to write love stories that moved people. But Penelope and the others still liked this place very much. They played here for many days. And these days, they also ate all the famous delicacies here. The most famous place here was none other than Lu Wai Lu. Of course, the food there was quite expensive, but Jiang Hai didn't care. After eating a meal, he concluded that it was a bit of a scam. West Lake fish in vinegar gravy, to be honest, most people weren't used to it. Song Fu fish soup. Jiang Hai was not used to eating it. Beggar's chicken soup. Of course, he was not used to eating it either. There were only 2 things that Jiang Hai liked to eat. One was the longjing shrimp. Jiang Hai really liked to eat this. The fragrance of the longjing, coupled with the elasticity of the shrimp, combined together, the taste was indeed quite perfect. The other one was the soup dumplings here. The crab roe, the pure meat, and the fresh shrimp all tasted quite good. These days, he had to eat this for breakfast every day. But other than these things, he was not used to eating Zhujiang dishes. They stayed at West Lake for 5 days and played for 5 days. Then they went to Wuzhen to play. Of course, this was a water town. After arriving, there was not much fun. After a simple tour of these 2 places, they went to Su Province, which was also the main target of Jiang Hai's trip to the south. In Su Province, they went to Nandu first. Nandu was the capital of the previous dynasty. It was also the first capital of the Ming dynasty. So, there were more things to play than Shanghai. Of course, the things to play here were things that Jiang Hai was more interested in. Some monasteries, Ming Shaoling, the presidential palace, and so on. There were more places to see. Although the scenic spots were not as grand as the capital, the quality was not bad. Most importantly, there were many things to see. After playing here for a while, Jiang Hai sent Delina, Marian, and Azalina back to Shanghai. Naturally, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi were there to take care of them. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, had to continue south to Tongnan City. His goal this time was there. There were no scenic spots there, so Jiang Hai didn't plan to take too many people there. In the end, he only asked Penelope to go with him. After he was done, he would return to Shanghai and take Delina and the others back to the capital. Then, they would return to the United States from the capital. Not to mention Delina and the others. Even Jiang Hai was a little tired. But thinking of the development of his manor, he was still very happy. After arriving in Tongnan City, Jiang Hai and Penelope took a good rest in the hotel for a whole day. After adjusting their bodies to the best state, the 2 went to their destination this time, Hai County. The target they were looking for this time was located there. The Huayang Group. Speaking of this group, it was very famous in China. Its main business scope was special products of aquaculture. This time, the Chongjiang swordfish that Jiang Hai wanted was a product of the Huayang Group. If he wanted to buy it, he had to come over and negotiate with them. Fortunately, the higher-ups had already informed them. When Jiang Hai called to say that he would come over, the people here had already sent a car and a person to take Jiang Hai and the others to the Huayang Group's precious fish breeding and scientific research base. That was the real place. Chapter 450. 1234, 2234, 3234. In a spacious classroom in Shanghai, Feng Yunqin, AI Xiaoxi, and a row of more than a dozen girls were wearing loose dance costumes, pressing down on a sissy in front of them. Oh, sorry, it was a gentleman. Following the gentleman's posture, they also danced. The song they were dancing now was the main song of a Korean girl group, called Cat Steps, and the name of the girl group was AOA. Of course, if Zhang Hai was here, he wouldn't understand at all. He didn't have a good impression of Korea at all. The only thing he knew seemed to be the era of thighs. It was also because for a period of time, Fu Yuan was very obsessed with this thing, and every day there was a chicken. Of course, it seemed that whether it was the difficulty of the dance or the uniformity, Feng Yunqin and the others had no way to be compared with a regular girl group, but there was a sense of temptation when they were twisting and turning there. Okay, girls, let's take a break. After one more time, tonight's performance will be over. After all, they were models. Good models may not sing well, but their figures were very good. And most importantly, because of the needs of filming, their bodies were very flexible. Even if some of them were stupid, it wasn't a problem for them to remember the dance steps of this song, not to mention that it had been reduced. So after this dance, the sissy was very satisfied. He clapped his hands and said with a proud face, "Phew." As soon as they heard his words, everyone here breathed a sigh of relief. Some of the physically weaker ones directly sat on the ground. Some of the physically stronger ones, such as Feng Yunqin and AI Xiaoxi, still had the strength to walk to the corner, pick up a bottle of water, and drink it while relaxing their physical strength. This kind of practice was quite intense for them. Sister Chen, I'm exhausted. Let's go eat tonight. Just as Feng Yunqin and AI Xiaoxi were resting here, a young girl crawled over with a dispirited look on her face. She blinked her eyes and said to Feng Yunqin. Feng Yunqin and Zhang Hai were the same age. They were both born in 1988. This year, they were already 27 years old. According to China's nominal age, they were already 28 years old. Logically speaking, at such an old age, they were actually not very active in this circle. After all, in the circle of young models, the replacement was very fast. Basically, if they were 25 years old and not popular, the company would ask them to take some more revealing photos. Youth and beauty had nothing to do with them. They would go for the sexy style. Then use their bodies to earn some money, or hook up with a rich man, and then retire. Of course, there were also those who didn't get anything, and they might end up participating in some kind of service work. It was rare for a girl of her age to participate in an event like CJ's unless she was specially invited. Otherwise, a normal SG would not let such an old girl be one. Feng Yunqin was an exception. Because the current Feng Yunqin really didn't look 27 years old. Her skin was very smooth and very white. According to the people of the company who selected the candidates, Feng Yunqin's body had a youthful aura, and at the same time, it also had a sense of a mature sister. Such a perfect appearance was naturally very attractive, especially those little boys who longed for a sister's love. There was no resistance, so for Feng Yunqin to join, everyone raised both hands in approval. As for the rest of the girls here, except for Feng Yunqin, there was not even a 25-year-old girl. The oldest was AI Xiaoxi, 23 years old. There were 3 other girls who were also 23 years old. The rest were 21, 20, 18, and 19 years old. These people were all high school students. Maybe they didn't study well, but they also came out to earn money. The girl who talked to Feng Yunqin just now was the youngest girl here. She was only 16 years old this year and had just graduated from junior high school. However, she didn't have to worry about taking the high school exam because she had already passed the art school exam. When the time came, she just had to go through the motions. After coming here, this girl was still very likable. She didn't have anything to do, nor was she spoiled. She just liked to eat. You still want to eat? If you continue to eat, you will become fat. Hearing the girl's words, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but laugh. Hey, I'm still growing. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, the girl couldn't help but raise her head and said impatiently, Okay, you can eat whatever you want. Looking at her appearance, Feng Yunqin and AI Xiaoxi laughed, then said to her. Hearing Feng Yunqin's words, the little girl also raised her fist excitedly. Looking at her appearance, Feng Yunqin couldn't help but think of her past. She used to be so naive. But fortunately, she met Zhang Hai, and Zhang Hai is her support. Call Deliana and the others later and see if they have eaten tonight. If they haven't eaten, let's go together. Shaking her head, Deliana shook the thoughts in her mind and said to Ai Xiaoxi with a smile. Right now, they were not short of money. Since the two of them had already shown their loyalty, Zhang Hai would not treat his women badly. When he was in the capital, he opened 2 bank cards, each with 10 million yuan in it, instantly raising him to the highest level of personal customer, and then gave one to each of the 2 girls. 10 million yuan is nothing for the current Zhang Hai. But for ordinary people, as long as they don't smoke or gamble, 10 million yuan is not a problem for them to live a peaceful life. This is also to let Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi have no worries. In the beginning, when Zhang Hai wanted to give them money in the United States, they were not willing to accept it. But now their mentality has changed, they are not too pretentious and accepted Zhang Hai's card. So now these 2 girls are completely rich, but they are still very low-key, and are not envied by others. This is also the reason why Feng Yunchen can do well here for so many years. She does not cause trouble, and others do not provoke her. This is the most important thing. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Ai Xiaoxi also took out her phone and sent a WeChat message. It just so happens that Deliana, Marian, and Azalina are watching TV in a suite at this time. After receiving the WeChat message, they agree to go out to eat without hesitation. Anyway, they have nothing to do. At this time, Zhang Hai has been in Sea City for a day. Today they have a good rest, booked 2 rooms, and after a simple meal with Penelope, they went to sleep. The next morning, they have to buy grenadier anchovies. Early the next morning, a minister of the Huayang group has already driven a car and is waiting downstairs of the hotel where Zhang Hai is staying. To be honest, the Huayang group is not very interested in Zhang Hai. After all, Zhang Hai is here to plunder their research results. Everyone knows the purpose of Zhang Hai is here. He came for the Yangtze grenadier anchovies. However, they have just succeeded in breeding this fish, and there is no way to raise it artificially. Zhang Hai came to rob them, which makes their superiors very dissatisfied. But even if they are dissatisfied, they have to give it to Zhang Hai. After all, this is a notice from the imperial court, which is not something they can disobey. The Huayang Group was established in 1995, and it can be cultivated and paid attention to. Of course, it is inseparable from the support of the imperial court. This was the only difference between China and the United States. In the United States, governors were elected. If a governor was appointed by himself, he could disobey the president. But if a high-ranking official dared to disobey the emperor, he would be courting death. But if a high-ranking official dared to disobey the emperor, he would be courting death. Even senior officials dare not disobey the imperial court's decision, let alone a provincial enterprise with the imperial court's shadow behind it. For example, arrange a person with a high level to greet Zhang Hai, and give him whatever he wants, as long as they don't lose money. When Zhang Hai went downstairs, the minister of the group and his driver have been waiting for a long time. Seeing their flattering smiles, Zhang Hai smiled a little embarrassedly. In fact, he cleaned up very quickly. But Penelope can't. Even if she hurries, it will take her 20 minutes to clean up. That's why she is so famous. I'm sorry. Women are more troublesome. I'm Zhang Hai. Hello. Looking at the person in front of him, Zhang Hai stretched out his hand with a smile, and the man immediately took Zhang Hai's hand with a smile on his face. It's okay, I understand. Come this way please. Shall we go to the group first, or directly to the research institute? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister was not angry and continued to smile. Usually, only others would wait for him. After he reached this position, he almost never waited for others. But Zhang Hai has the imperial court's shadow behind him, so he has to hold back even if he has any opinions. Let's go directly to the research institute. Zhang Hai doesn't want to see the faces of those bureaucrats. He came here for those species. Other things don't matter. He is not here to take advantage of others, so it is better to go straight to the point. He doesn't like to beat around the bush. Okay, then let's go. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister also smiled. In fact, not only does Zhang Hai not want to see those people, but those people also don't want to see Zhang Hai. They don't like a guy who comes to rob the fruits of their labor. The four of them got in the car and went to their destination this time. In the car, the minister also introduced the Huayang Group to Zhang Hai. Although the Huayang Group's main achievements are in aquatic products and agriculture, this group is still very big. The leading company is naturally the Aquatic Products Company. In addition to that, there is also the Puffer Franchise Company, Huazhou Real Estate Company, Nanhua Real Estate Company, Sankai Real Estate Company, Huahong Real Estate Company, Huaxing Human Resources Company, Huahui Investment Company, Financial Management Company. It can be said that this is a huge monster. Not only is it involved in agriculture, aquatic products, but also logistics, real estate, finance, insurance, wealth management, etc. This is also Zhang Hai with the Imperial Court's halo. If he came here by himself, they probably wouldn't even pay attention to him, let alone sell him seedlings? Sell my ass. He has to admit that sometimes, favors are really useful in China. Chapter 451. Along the way, the minister did not make Zhang Hai feel bored. He could always find something to talk about. For example, he asked Zhang Hai what he did for a living. After learning that Zhang Hai was a cattle farmer, he did not show any disdain. A cattle farmer could be recognized by the imperial court. This showed how big this guy's cattle farm was in the United States. Now he was also raising fish. This guy was definitely not as simple as he said. But Zhang Hai was not willing to say more. He could also use Zhang Hai's words to extend the topic. For example, when Zhang Hai talked about the cattle farm, he would tell Zhang Hai what kind of pasture the cattle should eat, what they should eat in spring, summer, autumn, winter, the storage of green fodder, the proportion of soybeans, etc. It could be said that this guy was indeed very good. He might not have raised a cow before, but he was quite familiar with these things on paper. After talking about cows, he talked about sheep, then horses, and then unknowingly he talked about traveling. When it came to tourism, the minister had a lot to say. After listening to him, Zhang Hai was also very inspired. At the same time, he also knew that Zhang Hai had also developed a tourism route in a small town in the United States. He could not help but nod in his heart. He knew that Zhang Hai was not that simple. After asking about the town's situation, he also gave Zhang Hai a lot of suggestions. For example, the party could not only be organized by the town's residents, but also by the tourists. For example, the tour group could be a unit of people. They could not let the locals help them prepare some ingredients, light a fire, etc., and then watch from the side. They could host their own party. This would be much more comfortable. As for the food, the tourists could also do it themselves. They could go fishing, go hunting in the mountains, and most importantly, there were no cultural attractions in the town. Zhang Hai could set up an Indian museum or a simple museum of American history in the commercial street. This could attract some people who thought they were noble to visit the town. It was not just for entertainment and play. Hearing the minister's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. This guy is amazing. What he said, Zhang Hai had never thought about it before. But now that he thought about it, it was true that if he went out with a large group of people, if he kept hosting the party according to the other party's habits, they would also feel uncomfortable. It was better to go out alone. It gave people a refreshing feeling and also a sense of freedom. As for the commercial street, if it was purely for commerce, it might really not work because tourists nowadays were quite disgusted with shopping. Of course, it did not rule out the possibility that some groups were purely buying groups. However, most of the tourists were not willing to buy things. Under such circumstances, they needed to be attracted to that street. A free museum could allow them to understand the history of the Native Americans and the history of the United States. Of course, the United States didn't seem to have any history, but it could also inspire the superiority of the people. It was really a good idea. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but quietly remember this in his heart. When he went back, he would discuss it with Mayor Wallace and do it. He had to admit that these officials were really smart. While Zhang Hai was thinking and the minister was talking, they arrived at their target this time. To be honest, this aquaculture company was really beautiful. After the car stopped, Zhang Hai and the others walked out. As soon as they walked out, they saw a sea of trees. It was like a piece of spiritual jade on a boundless seashore. Gorgeous European-style buildings were hidden in the sea just like that. In 1995, the Huayang Group and an investment group in Singapore had spent $30 million to build this place. $30 million in 1995 was equivalent to $300 million now. It might even be more than that. Not only was there an aquaculture company, but there was also a botanical garden. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't know much about plants. He wasn't very interested in these things. His goal here was to buy aquaculture, that was all. Under the guidance of the minister, Zhang Hai walked into the aquaculture park with him. As soon as they walked in and saw the diagram in front of them, Zhang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. This time, he really came to the right place. In this aquaculture park, there were not only Yangtze River grenadier fish, but also many conservation Yangtze River precious aquatic products. The first thing that Zhang Hai and the others saw after entering the park was the white-fin dolphin, Huaxia's most famous aquatic creature. This kind of national first-class protected animal was naturally not sold here. Zhang Hai wanted to buy it, but he couldn't buy it no matter how much money he spent. They were here to reproduce the next generation. This was also a breeding dolphin. After giving birth to a child, the child would be released back to the Yangtze River. Looking at the big white dolphin in front of him in the water tank in front of him, Zhang Hai also raised a lot of dolphins in his home. He was still a little close to this kind of creature. Compared to dolphins, he preferred sharks, but there were no sharks here. After briefly looking at the white-fin dolphin for a while and taking 2 photos, Zhang Hai and the others continued to walk inside. This research institute studied all the precious fish in the Yangtze River. Among them, the Yangtze River grenadier fish was actually not the most endangered species. Not to mention the white-fin dolphin, there were even more precious fish behind. For example, the next thing they saw was the white sturgeon. The white sturgeon was the Huaxia spoon-snout sturgeon. This kind of fish had a close relative in America. It could grow up to 2 meters and had a huge mouth. However, this kind of white sturgeon was a special product of Huaxia. It was a national first-class protected animal, slightly more than the white-fin dolphin, but also limited. There were a total of 2 groups here, which meant that there were 16 fish. In addition to the white sturgeon, there was also the Dartmouth sturgeon, which was also a kind of sturgeon, but it was also a national first-class protected animal. Walking inside, Zhang Hai saw another kind of fish. This kind of fish was very beautiful, and its back was pink. If this fish was sold, the price would be higher, but unfortunately, no one dared to sell it, because this fish was called rouge fish, which was also a national protected animal. The strength was not so strong, but it was also a second-class protected animal. It was not easy for Zhang Hai to get it. After looking at a lot of protected animals, they finally came to the fish that Zhang Hai was most concerned about. It could be sold for money, which was the fish area that had successfully multiplied. Of course, the fish here was still quite expensive. The first thing that Zhang Hai saw was the pufferfish area, which was also the largest area in this place. To be honest, this thing could be found everywhere. There were pufferfish all over the world, but a long time ago, except for the Japanese, no one ate it. There were a total of 54 kinds of pufferfish along the coast of Huaxia, and the annual output reached 3 to 4 million tons. This kind of fish was not very rare in this area. But because there were too few people who could cook this kind of fish, the price of this kind of fish was still a little expensive. Although the meat was fresh and tender, and the taste was quite good in Zhang Hai's mouth, there were still a few people who could eat it. Basically, most of the pufferfish were only eaten along the coast and the Yangtze River. Although Zhang Hai liked to eat it, he didn't know how to cook it, so he endured it. Behind the pufferfish, there was a kind of fish called the round-mouthed copperfish. This fish belonged to the carp family, and it looked similar to a carp. Now it had been artificially cultivated, so the price was not very high. Zhang Hai had this fish for dinner in the hotel last night, and the taste was not bad, so Zhang Hai was not too interested in it. Behind it, there were long thin loach, rock carp, and other economic fish. To be honest, Zhang Hai didn't know much about these fish, and he didn't particularly like them. Because he wanted to buy fish, if the fish was not extremely delicious, then it was extremely expensive. After all, he was in this line of business. Therefore, he was not interested in ordinary fish. As for some fish species that were not precious to begin with, such as some common Asian carp, he could catch them in Winthrop. There were plenty of Asian carp there, and they were all wild. However, Zhang Hai was not interested in all the fish. Among them, there was one that Zhang Hai was slightly interested in, which was another one of the 3 delicacies in the Yangtze River, the Chinese herring. This kind of fish could be found in the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the Zhujiang River, so Zhang Hai was not in a hurry to introduce this kind of fish. Because of this, Zhang Hai just looked at it and walked back. Soon, they came to the breeding area of the Yangtze River grenadier fish. This is the breeding area of the Yangtze River grenadier fish. We can produce about 400,000 fry every year, but less than 100,000 can successfully grow to 1 year old. If these fish want to live, they have to be released back to the river to live in the sea after 1 year old. We started releasing 100,000 fish the year before last. In the end, we were able to recover about 1,000 fish. This is the situation where we raised them until they were 1 year old. These fish are really difficult to raise. Looking at Zhang Hai, the minister sighed. It is said that the crying child gets the milk. Although Zhang Hai didn't know if these numbers were true, he knew that the minister was complaining about being poor. Although the number of seeds produced by the Yangtze River grenadier fish was not particularly large, it was definitely not small. After all, it was a fish, not an ordinary mammal. Even if it was really as he said, to recover 1,000 fish, not to mention matching 500 or even 100 fish, at least millions of eggs could be harvested, and then hundreds of thousands of small blade fish would be hatched without a problem. Now that artificial reproduction has been achieved, mass production may not be too far away. How many of these fry do you have now? Zhang Hai asked directly, ignoring the minister who was crying about being poor. At present, there are a total of 500,000 fry in this institute, all of which are more than 1 month old. Hearing that Zhang Hai ignored his words, the minister also smiled. Sure enough, Zhang Hai was not so easy to fool. I want half, you name your price. Looking at the minister in front of him, Zhang Hai said seriously. Chapter 452. Half. 250,000? That's impossible. It's very different from what we discussed at the beginning. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister shook his head before he could make a bid. This number was not acceptable to them. Of course, the number of 500,000 was actually nonsense. He said that there were only 500,000 fish here. In addition, there were also Chongjiang grenadier fish in the Huayang group. However, even if Zhang Hai knew that, he wouldn't care. Because it's impossible for him to buy all of these anchovies. What he wants can be achieved here. When these anchovies are transported back to the United States, Zhang Hai will inject some aura into them. When the time comes, they will be easy to raise. 250,000 anchovies, in just a few years, forming a population is not a problem. It's precisely because of this that Zhang Hai dared to say so. We talked about 70 yuan per fish. I'll pay 80 yuan now, Zhang Hai said calmly while looking at the minister in front of him. 250,000 fish, plus 10 yuan, would be 2.5 million yuan. Zhang Hai wouldn't even blink when he added it up. If these 250,000 fish seedlings were sent to him, it wouldn't be a problem to raise 100,000 fish. When each fish grew half a catty, he would sell them in China. According to the current price of fish, 1 or 2 kilograms of fish would sell for about 400 yuan per catty, and 1 or 2 kilograms of fish would sell for 1,000 yuan per catty. Selling half a catty of fish at 6,000 yuan per catty was not excessive. Zhang Hai's $800 would sell them in China for 4,800 yuan per catty. 100,000 fish would be 50,000 catties, which would be $40 million. If these fish grew for another year and gave birth to some small fish, how many would he sell? If he were to sell them next year, he would have no idea how many fish he would sell. 1 million fish would be worth $400 million, which was much more expensive than the red fish in the United States. Even the yellow fish would not be able to compete with it. This was only 1 million fish. What if it was 10 million? Who said that fish farming was not as profitable as cattle farming? That depended on what kind of fish you were raising. 80 yuan, this won't work either. Hearing Zhang Hai's bid, the minister hesitated. On one hand, he was tempted by Zhang Hai's temptation, and on the other hand, he was under pressure from the imperial court. To be honest, he was a little tempted by 80 yuan, but he couldn't sell it so easily. 100 for one tail. I want 250,000 tails. Seeing that the minister was a little tempted, Zhang Hai didn't say anything and directly increased it to 100, which was another 5 million. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister couldn't help but gasp. I need to ask the higher-ups. When he heard Zhang Hai's words, he knew that he couldn't be too greedy. So after hesitating for a moment, he went to the side and made a call to the higher-ups. Zhang Hai squatted by the pool and looked at the little fish swimming in it. These guys were really swimming gold bars. No, they were even more expensive than gold bars. How about this? Let's each take a step back. My boss wants to sell 91, but we can only sell it for 200,000. About 10 minutes later, the minister came back and looked at Zhang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai smacked his lips. Although there were less than 50,000 taels, Zhang Hai could be regarded as having achieved his goal. 200,000 taels it is. At the moment, he stood up. Since he had already decided, there was no need to hesitate anymore. Then he followed this person to the head office of Huayang Group and signed a contract there. Zhang Hai spent 18 million renminbi to buy 200,000 seedlings of Yangtze River grenadier fish. Huayang Group was responsible for sending these seedlings to Zhang Hai's manor and guaranteed that the survival rate before the seedlings entered the water was more than 90%. That was to say, of the 200,000 taels, at least 180,000 had to be alive in the end. If not, Zhang Hai could refuse to buy them. After signing the contract, Zhang Hai first transferred 8 million RMB, and the remaining 10 million would be transferred once the fish arrived. The people of Huayang Group were very satisfied with this. Although they still felt a little distressed, it was a pleasant surprise to be able to sell one tael for 90 yuan. Of course, the most important thing was that they didn't believe that Zhang Hai could raise these seedlings. However, when Zhang Hai's first batch of fish entered the market of Huaxia next year, they would know what it meant to raise a tiger and invite calamity. Was Zhang Hai's grenadier fish an ordinary grenadier fish? Each of them was a fine product. After signing the big contract, Zhang Hai stayed here for one more day. Naturally, he had to attend the banquet in the evening. However, the people of Huayang Group saw that Zhang Hai took Penelope with him, so they didn't arrange anything else for Zhang Hai. However, Penelope and Zhang Hai actually didn't have that kind of relationship, and Zhang Hai didn't have the mood to flirt with this girl. Of course, the most important thing was that Zhang Hai didn't know how to flirt. Usually, the girls would take the initiative to flirt with him, and then he would be reluctant. Now that he was asked to take the initiative, he really didn't know how to do it. So they spent the night like this. The next day, they returned to Shanghai. After staying in Shanghai for a few more days, Zhang Hai didn't wait for the opening of CJ. After spending a few days with Feng Yunchen and the others, he returned to the capital with Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Penelope. Of course, when he was in Shanghai, he also got to know the girls who practiced with Feng Yunchen and treated them to a good meal. However, he didn't have any feelings for these girls. He only did this to let them take care of Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. After spending a few more days with them, Zhang Hai returned to the capital. After resting for a day in the capital and having a meal with Qi Li, Zhang Hai went to look for Du Feimin. These days, Du Feimin represented the Arabian region and had almost finished the negotiations with the imperial court. Now that the oil price had been negotiated, they still had some differences on the amount of oil to be delivered. Huaxia was a big oil user, and oil was naturally the most important thing in the world now. Not only cars needed it, but also planes, tanks, and even artillery vehicles needed it. However, Huaxia was a country that lacked oil. In order to deal with a possible war, they had to have a lot of strategic reserves. Currently, Huaxia's oil mainly came from Siberia, which was Soviet Russia. Now that they could have one more line, they naturally hoped to have as many as possible. However, Du Feimin didn't dare to sell too much. He just didn't want to put all his eggs in one basket, and didn't want to directly change baskets. However, these were all small matters. As long as he was willing to sell, it was the best thing for the imperial court. And Zhang Hai naturally came to look for him for his oil futures. After having dinner with Du Feimin at his villa, Zhang Hai had an extra $600 million worth of oil futures. Although $1 billion wasn't a lot, $1 billion worth of oil futures should be enough to guarantee Zhang Hai's safety in the United States for the time being. If a giant wanted to kill Zhang Hai, then Zhang Hai could use this $1 billion as a stepping stone. If he were to seek refuge with the Rockefeller family or the Morgan family, with the protection of these great families, although he would have a hard time, it would still be impossible for them to make a move on him. Naturally, he wouldn't take it out unless he had no other choice. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai's return to the country also came to an end. Then, they boarded a flight back to the United States. Because he had already received the news that Sun Yuan and the Huayong Group had reacted quickly after receiving his deposit. With the money in place, naturally, everything was done quickly. The imperial court came forward to rent a large cargo ship, and the things that Jiang Hai wanted had already been quarantined under the United States security. After all, these things were going to enter the United States. Naturally, they needed the help of the United States Customs to deal with them. They quarantined them to see if there were any diseases. Of course, the most important thing was to check if there were any chips or the like inside. Of course, there were none of these things. These were the most basic fish and animals. The 200,000 fish seedlings of the Huayong Group, the tea plants and animals that Jiang Hai bought the other day, and the 3 million large yellow croaker seedlings from Guangdong province were included. Now, after catching 8 Chinese bahabas, the ship could set sail. They could take 2 routes. One was to cross the Pacific Ocean, then enter the Atlantic Ocean from the Gulf of Mexico, then go all the way up to Jiang Hai's territory. The other was to go through the Strait of Malacca, then cross the Indian Ocean, and enter the Atlantic Ocean. Compared to the latter, the former route was a little longer, but it was safer. Therefore, the imperial court decided to take the first route. The estimated time of arrival would be in the middle of July, which means that it would take more than a month. When Jiang Hai returns this time, he will be busy with a lot of things. Not to mention other things, he has to dig the river first. Although the large yellow croakers and Chinese bahabas were marine fish, the Yangtze River grenadier was a freshwater fish. He had to have a freshwater river area. Moreover, he was preparing to raise some other freshwater fish. With Xiao Ye, his master, he could not waste it. As for digging the river, this needed to be studied. The machine was easy to get. He just needed to get the construction team that was building the town here. It would only take a few days to build a river. However, how to use the river, whether to draw water in or to dig an underground hole, this needed to be studied by Jiang Hai. Moreover, the direction was very important. He wanted the Yangtze River grenadier to swim into the sea and also to swim back into the river to lay eggs. It was definitely not possible to swim up and down, and it was also not possible to make it too complicated. Moreover, he had to ensure the integrity of the grassland. It seems that I have to find a specialist to study it when I go back. Sitting in the first-class cabin of the plane, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly. His brain had become a little rigid after not using it for too long. Jiang Hai had been used to solving problems with money. If money could not solve it, violence would solve it. Schemes and tricks, beautiful women painted skin, they had nothing to do with him. Now, he suddenly had to consider these things. He was really a little confused. But then he laughed again. This time, he really gained a lot from the trip to Huaxia. First of all, the guy who wanted to kill him was dead. His safety could be guaranteed. Second, he also got the connections of Du Feimin and the imperial court. Although Jiang Hai did not want to touch these 2 connections, in case something happened in the future, he could protect himself. Most importantly, he got a lot of delicious food. Chapter 453. Phew, we're finally back. Jiang Hai walked out of the airport with a slightly tired body. He couldn't help but stretch. Although Jiang Hai and the others were sitting in the first class, which was much better than the business class and economy class, they were still very tired. After all, they had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. It would be strange if they weren't tired. Even he was like this now, let alone Delina and the others. They were so sleepy that their eyelids were fighting to stay open. However, the sun was still very bright. It was not the time to sleep yet. From the United States to Huaxia, a flight of more than 10 hours was bearable. However, the most unbearable thing was jet lag. What time was it when you boarded the plane? What time was it when you got off the plane? If you only looked at your watch, it would be hard to imagine that you had already spent more than 10 hours in the air. That was how jet lag passed. Come on, cheer up. Don't sleep yet. If you sleep now, you will wake up in the middle of the night. The next few days will be difficult. Let's go back first. Jiang Hai glanced at the girls behind him. Except for Azalina, all of them were very tired. After all, what did Azalina do before? Not to mention sleeping in the first-class plane, she could even sleep in a small sampan. Because she had to maintain her strongest fighting power at all times, she didn't have insomnia at all. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and the others yawned and stretched. They said listlessly, "Oh." Looking at them, Jiang Hai also smiled. The 5 of them took their luggage and left the airport. When they went to the airport, each of them only had a small bag. But when they came back, they took a lot of things. As Jiang Hai said, they didn't have anything to buy when they went to the airport, but they couldn't just leave the things they bought there. For example, some underwear, and some small souvenirs that Daliana and the others had bought for them. Before they left, Chili specially bought a lot of delicious food for them. These needed a place to store them. Therefore, when they left, they carried a small bag and were empty-handed, but when they came back, they each carried a box. Walking to the parking lot, Jiang Hai's battle shield was already covered with dust. There was nothing he could do about it. The dust at the airport was huge. This was inevitable. The dust wouldn't become smaller just because it was America. After putting everything in the car, Jiang Hai restarted the engine. A car worth 20 million yuan was indeed very powerful. After not moving for such a long time, the engine roared to life as soon as he pressed the start button. Jiang Hai used the glass in front of him to brush the glass so that he could at least see the road clearly. Then, he led everyone out of the airport. However, he wasn't in a hurry to go back to Boston. Instead, he deliberately went to the nearby New York first, had lunch, and then washed the car. After that, he drove to Boston with a brand new car. He first sent Penelope back to her home in Boston, but obviously, Penelope didn't want Jiang Hai to know where her home was. She got off in front of the block where her home was located. After telling Jiang Hai that she would summarize the contract, she left. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, led the rest of the people back home. Finally, after a long time, of course it was just a long time, Jiang Hai and the others returned to the manor again. Just as they opened the door of the manor. Woof woof. In the distance, Little Huang, Chirpy and Bucktooth. Oh, and the 2 capybaras who were playing by themselves, quickly ran over. It was obvious that Jiang Hai and the others missed them a lot when they weren't around. When the car stopped, everyone also walked down with their luggage. As soon as Jiang Hai got out of the car, Little Huang and Xiaobai pounced on him and almost pushed him down. Bucktooth had already climbed up Jiang Hai's trousers and was lying on Jiang Hai's hair and constantly rubbing against it. All right. Jiang Hai patted Little Huang and Xiaobai's heads and stood up with a smile. These guys were really enthusiastic. After rubbing them hard, Jiang Hai patted Bucktooth on his head and Chirpy, who had been jumping next to him. The current Qiuqiu, if one only looked at its size, was no smaller than an ordinary white-headed sea eagle, but it still couldn't fly. Every day it jumped and walked, and of course it ran very fast. Jiang Hai wondered if this guy was a cross between a white-headed sea eagle and an ostrich. If it wasn't for its long legs, he would have taken Chirpy for a DNA test. Looks like I'll have to teach it to fly after a while. Looking at Chirpy, Jiang Hai also made up his mind. He couldn't let it jump on the ground all the time. How could it still look like a bird of prey? It was clearly a big chicken. On the other side, Delina and Marion were also very enthusiastic about their capybaras. Although capybaras looked a bit silly, they were actually very smart. At least they could recognize people. Moreover, they almost didn't have any temper and were surprisingly good-tempered. These days, they had also become familiar with Delina and Marion. After not seeing them for so many days, they also missed them very much. And Delina and Marion had also been thinking about these guys. They had to admit that these guys were really quite attractive. And looking at the appearance of Jiang Hai's family of 3, Azalina shrugged her shoulders. She even wanted to raise an animal. Jiang, you're back. Perhaps because the movement outside was too loud, at this time, the door of Jiang Hai's villa was also open from the inside. Aphrodite, who was wearing an apron and tidying up the room, saw Jiang Hai come back, and she also called out excitedly. Looking at Aphrodite's appearance, Jiang Hai also chuckled, put down Little Huang and Xiaobai in his arms, walked in front of Aphrodite, and gave her a hug. Feeling Jiang Hai's hug, Aphrodite's heart was 70% gratified and 30% happy. If Jiang Hai could directly carry her back to the room at this time, that would be the best thing for her. But unfortunately, she also knew that this was impossible. Now that she could have a hug, it was already good enough for her. We've really troubled you these days. We brought you gifts. After hugging, Jiang Hai took the initiative to let go of Aphrodite, then said to her with a smile, then walked into the room with the suitcase. At that moment, everyone also walked into the room. After hearing that Jiang Hai was back, everyone in the manor rushed over. Anyway, at this time, the work was already over, so it didn't matter whether it was earlier or later. Instead, it was more important to understand the situation from their boss. As time passed, the first to come back were Dulles Gerard, O'Connor Murphy, Dinah Taylor, Hilda, and the others who were busy at the winery. Because the grapes were not ripe yet, they had to wait until September to harvest. Now, there was nothing to do except to get rid of the insects. Then, the furthest ones were Edouard Anderson, Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marlon Rupert. Of course, their families arrived at Jiang Hai's house one step ahead of them. Because Jiang Hai was back today, although he was a little tired, he still planned to hold a party, so they came over to prepare dinner first. Not only did they come over, but Philemon Turner's wife also came over. Now she was the leader of these women. The last ones to come back were Robbins Garcia, Philemon Turner, Burke Dollar, Harriman Fells, and Belle Lester. Looking at the crowd that filled the living room on the first floor, Jiang Hai's smile never disappeared. In this world, there were so many people who were worried about him. Although Jiang Hai also knew that many of them were worried about him because he was their boss, and if they lost him, they wouldn't be able to find such a good job. But it still made Jiang Hai very happy. The most important thing for a person to live in this world was to let others remember him. Thinking back to a year ago at this time, he might have died at home and no one would have known. Life was really unpredictable. The wheel of fate was just rolling forward, and everything was pushed one by one. Jiang Hai was not so bad, because he didn't lose himself because of the skyrocketing wealth. He didn't want to become the richest man, nor did he want to enter the political world. He was a man who followed his desires. He knew contentment, so he was very calm. After the crowd arrived, everyone began to busy themselves. Most of the women were preparing dinner, and Jiang Hai and the others began to distribute the gifts before dinner. Americans were very willing to accept gifts, but they didn't have the habit of returning gifts. Naturally, when they give you a gift, you don't need to return a gift. This was a matter of opinion. Jiang Hai, Delina, and Marion prepared gifts for everyone. After all, Azalina wasn't familiar with Robbins and the others, so she didn't prepare any gifts. She only prepared one for Aphrodite. This was because when Jiang Hai wasn't here, Aphrodite was the one who delivered food to Azalina. Among these people besides Jiang Hai, Aphrodite was the one who was most familiar with her. Azalina gave a silk scarf. She bought it when she went to the Zhejiang region. The silk there was quite famous. A small piece of silk scarf cost her a few hundred yuan. Naturally, it was made of pure silk. Jiang Hai's gifts were also similar to these. He didn't lack money, so naturally, the gifts he gave were all very good. On the other hand, Delina and Marion's gifts were very cheap. For example, some souvenirs and hats with 5 red stars sewn on them. These things were cheap, but they also represented their sincerity. Naturally, Jiang Hai's gifts were very expensive. For example, Robbins and the others gave some things with regional characteristics. For example, some ivory carvings, some wood carvings, some wooden pipes and so on. There were a lot of huaxia gifts, and the women gave silk scarves. This was also because of Azalina's inspiration. Although it wasn't cheap, Jiang Hai didn't care about the money. The silk scarves in Hang City were not big, but they cost a few hundred. Even the most expensive ones would cost a few thousand. It was really not cheap. Chapter 454. By the way, where are Bernice and Xiaoya? After giving out the gifts, Jiang Hai found that there were still 2 things in his hand. It was a pair of Hatian jade bracelets, pure white jade without any impurities. This was the second time Jiang Hai returned to the capital and he specially got it from Fatty Wang. This pair of bracelets was worth 120,000 yuan. This was also the gift Jiang Hai prepared for Bernice and Xiaoya. Jiang Hai bought 4 of the most expensive gifts this time. This pair of bracelets, a necklace, and a ring. He had already given the necklace to Aphrodite, and now Aphrodite was playing with it. The ring. He prepared to give it to Scheit Clive, but it was up to her to see if she could understand his thoughts. As for the bracelets, they were theirs, but he didn't see them here, which made Jiang Hai a little surprised. Could it be that they left? Speaking of which, Jiang Hai felt a little sorry for these two girls in his heart. After all, they had helped Jiang Hai in the past. Jiang Hai had already agreed to treat the other party's illness. In the end, after the other party came, Jiang Hai didn't treat the other party's illness. Instead, he ate the other party's cooking every day. In the end, the other party almost lost his life. So, he felt somewhat apologetic. Among the gifts he bought this time, their gifts were naturally the most expensive. Jiang Hai hoped that this gift could make up for his heart. But after giving out the gifts, he didn't send out these two things, which made him a little puzzled. Xiao Ya and Bernice should still be in my villa. Although they know that you are back, isn't it a little inconvenient for them now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite touched the necklace Jiang Hai gave her and said in a daze. What she was thinking now was, what did Jiang Hai mean by giving her this necklace? Did he want to tie her up for a lifetime? Oh, I forgot. I'll send it to them. Seeing that the sun hadn't set yet, Jiang Hai patted his head. He had forgotten about this, so he couldn't help but stand up and prepare to leave. Boss, everything is almost ready. Should we start the fire first? Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, Philip stopped Jiang Hai and said anxiously. A party in the United States naturally had to be popular. As for Jiang Hai and the others, other than some cold dishes and soup, everything else could be roasted. Fish, prawns and meat, it was not interesting to just grill them with charcoal. It would be more fun to make a fire. Jiang Hai was in charge of his own manor. It was not the first time he had done something like this. Naturally, there was nothing to hesitate about. Start the fire first, I'll be back soon. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and then left the room. It has been almost half a month since Jiang Hai left. In this half a month, Jiang Hai's villa has almost been renovated. The outer walls were all new, and now there is a smell of paint and gum. Of course, Jiang Hai is not short of money. The things he uses are the best. These things are not industrial products and are harmless to the human body. Especially the gum, these are real gum, 100% pure natural products, and are not harmful to people. But although the outside is almost done, Jiang Hai's room is simply cleaned. Because before the room was redone, Jiang Hai had already called back. His room, shop, and He Tianyu's room have already been booked. Naturally, there is no need to redo it. He just needs to wait for He Tianyu to come over. As for Jiang Hai these days, he will live in the guest room. Anyway, he has a lot of guest rooms here. But although the house has been renovated, Bernice and Xiao Ya did not move in. Because in such a big room, except for Jiang Hai's animals, only the two of them are living here. They are also a little scared. Rather than this, it is better to live in the small villa. Jiang Hai is also familiar with Aphrodite's villa. After leaving the villa, he has already walked to Aphrodite's villa. From far away, he has already seen Bernice standing on the second floor looking at him. When she saw him, Bernice's cold face showed a rare smile. It is obvious that she is very happy to see him back. Hi! Walking to the bottom of the villa, Jiang Hai waved at Bernice, but when she saw Jiang Hai saw her, Bernice's smile disappeared again, then she turned her head, ignoring Jiang Hai, and disappeared from the second floor. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. What is this situation? What does it mean? If he has a real girlfriend, he will understand that this woman is angry, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai has no girlfriend. So he just touched his nose, then he opened the door and walked in, and went straight to the second floor. But just as he walked to the stairs, he saw Bernice with her hands in her pockets, looking at Jiang Hai with a proud face. You still know to come back. I thought you had already forgotten us sisters. Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice said with a face full of displeasure. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose. Why do these words make me feel like a heartless man? Oh, this is little Ya's situation. It's not easy to leave here, otherwise, I would have taken you with me. But now is not the time to pay attention to this matter. Jiang Hai was originally apologetic, and his tone couldn't help but soften. TCH, we won't go even if you take us. What are you doing here? Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Bernice's eyes couldn't help but show a hint of joy, but then it disappeared, and she restored her proud look. Yes, I came to give you gifts this time, hee hee, I have a party there, let's go together in a while. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai raised his hand and said with a helpless look. Hearing that Zhang Hai came to give gifts and saw 2 gift boxes, Bernice showed an expression of, you know your place. Then she took Zhang Hai into little Ya's room. As soon as he walked in, Zhang Hai saw a white world again. He hadn't seen little Ya for many days, but her expression was still the same. The pure white elf was sitting in the white corner, looking at the thick book in front of her. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she raised her head. When she saw that it was Zhang Hai, little Ya's face clearly showed a smile. You're back, how did things go? Looking at her, Zhang Hai also walked over with a smile, but he only took 1 step when he was stopped by Bernice, who then pointed at his feet. At this time, Zhang Hai remembered that he should pay attention to little Ya's room. He couldn't help but shrug helplessly, put on the shoe covers next to him, walked in, and sat opposite little Ya. Things have been done, so I came back immediately. Here, these are the gifts I brought for you from Huaxia. You and your sister each have one. Looking at little Ya, Zhang Hai handed over the box inside. After little Ya took it, she took the initiative to give one to Bernice. The 2 sisters looked at each other, then opened the box in front of them, but when they opened it, they couldn't help but be surprised. This is too expensive. Although they didn't know much about jade, they weren't stupid. At a glance, they knew that Zhang Hai's 2 bracelets must be expensive. They were not relatives, so it was somewhat inappropriate to give such expensive gifts. Don't say that you don't want it, and don't return it to me. You know, I don't lack this money. Speaking of which, this gift is also because I feel sorry in my heart. You said that you came to treat your illness, and I haven't cured your illness yet, but you almost lost your life because of it. This is also my apology in my heart. If you don't accept it, I will feel uneasy. Looking at the 2 women's expressions, Zhang Hai first raised his hand, then said to them with a self-deprecating smile. Actually, you don't need to think like this, we don't care very much. Such an exciting thing is not so easy to encounter, right sister? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, little Ya smiled, then looked at Bernice next to her. Humph. However, Bernice still didn't give Zhang Hai a good look, and she was still in a tsundere buff. Okay, accept it. At night, move back to my villa. I will start treating your illness tomorrow, and it should not take long for you to recover. Looking at little Ya, Zhang Hai said with a serious face. Really? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, this time, not only little Ya, but Bernice also turned her head and looked at Zhang Hai with a shocked face. In fact, Bernice had already given up hope for little Ya's illness. This kind of illness, there was no cure in the world. The reason why she brought little Ya here was also a desperate effort. Later, she found that the environment here was good, and Zhang Hai was also a good person, so she wanted to let little Ya stay here for a while as a vacation, which was also good. But she didn't expect that Zhang Hai now actually said that he could really cure little Ya's illness, and the sisters couldn't help but be shocked. Thank you. Looking at Zhang Hai, little Ya nodded seriously and said with a sincere face. You don't have to say thank you to me, we are friends, aren't we? Haha, well, let's change the topic. We can't keep talking about your illness, right? It's still quite early before dark. Hearing little Ya's words, Zhang Hai laughed and said loudly. Dark? What do you mean? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, little Ya was a little confused, and looked at Zhang Hai with a cute face and asked. I have a bonfire party at my place. If you don't participate, you won't have enough people. When it's dark, we will go there and have a good meal tonight. With a clap of his hands, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing his words, little Ya couldn't help but be a little speechless. But then she also laughed. A party, she seems to have never participated in this kind of thing. Looking at her sister's longing look, Bernice wanted to say something, but she didn't make a sound when she opened her mouth. She knew that although her sister had been smiling, in fact, her heart was more bitter than anyone else because she knew that if she showed a painful expression, she would be in more pain, so she had been enduring like this. She really wanted to go now, with Zhang Hai. Nothing will happen. Chapter 455. Fix the route. Isn't the left side a little high? Put the things in the distance. While driving, listening to the shouts in his ears, Zhang Hai slowly poked his head out of the window and looked at the busy people in the distance. Since Zhang Hai transferred the money to Winthrop, Winthrop started to build. They first found a commercial street in the center of Winthrop, not far behind the town's church. Then they started to work for the people on the street. It was all about money. The United States was different from China. All the land in China belonged to the government. If a developer wanted to develop the land, it would be easy for problems to arise. However, it was different in the United States. The land here belonged to the people. If the town government wanted to use the land, they had to discuss it with the people. Fortunately, the people in Winthrop knew that the tourism development and benefits did not belong to the town government, but to them. Therefore, they were quite happy to sell their land and houses. Especially when the town introduced the idea that they could use their previous properties to exchange for a house, they were even happier. The processing speed was very fast. After all the people had moved away, the town began to be built according to the drawings drawn by the designer that Mayor Wallace had specially found. The first thing to be started was the expansion of the shooting range, because it was the simplest, but it occupied a large area. When Zhang Hai went to Huaxia, the main part of the shooting range had been expanded. Now, the interior was being renovated. They needed to paint some fireproof materials and soundproof materials. Next was the construction of the town's commercial street and seaside villas. These two projects started together. As for the other things, such as the horse ranch, fishing boat, private manor, school, party square, fishing grounds, and so on, they were easy to get. The most difficult things were these things. According to Moses Adams, it would take about 2 months to finish all these things. Now, almost a month had passed, and the main part of the shooting range was almost done. Winthrop hired a total of 3 construction teams to build here. There was one in Winthrop town, and the other 2 were from Boston. After all, they were working for money and had nothing to do with other things. Therefore, the quality of these people's work was quite good. However, because of the construction, the main road of Winthrop, which might not be congested even once in 100 years, was a little congested today. Not only was there a lot of traffic, but the traffic was also very slow. Usually, it would only take Zhang Hai about half an hour to travel from the manor to Winthrop town, and this was considered a slow drive. However, he had been driving for an hour today, and he had just entered the town not long ago. It could not be helped. However, driving slowly was not without benefits. At least he knew that he was quite popular in Winthrop. Zhang Hai was a relatively introverted and unique person. He did not like to talk or communicate with others. He preferred to live in his own circle and world. Therefore, it had been almost a year since he came to Winthrop. However, other than the people in his manor, the number of people he knew in Winthrop town could be counted with one hand. The residents in the town were also unfamiliar with Zhang Hai. The Boston area could be considered one of the most xenophobic areas in the United States. The worst was probably Texas. The people of Texas were quite xenophobic towards both black and yellow people, except for Houston. Fortunately, Zhang Hai didn't ask for help from others, and he also had money. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to live here. You can't expect the Americans to take the initiative to care for you. This was simply impossible. However, Zhang Hai did a lot of good things this year. He let the people of Winthrop know him. First, he funded the reconstruction of the collapsed classrooms in the elementary school. Now, he invested money in Winthrop to promote tourism. This was a very good thing for the town and its residents, because not only did they have more opportunities to work, but they also had more opportunities to make money. Therefore, 90% of the town's residents were very grateful to Zhang Hai. The remaining 10% may be conservative, but they didn't resist Zhang Hai. So when Zhang Hai slowly drove in, a lot of people nodded to him in greeting. This made Zhang Hai want to add more money to invest, but he knew that he couldn't because he had no money now. He originally had close to 1 billion in cash. He had spent 250 million on the town investment and 600 million on oil futures, so he only had 150 million left. He needed about 70 million to buy Hetian jade, and he also bought a lot of random things in China. This was close to 100 million. He only had less than 40 million in liquid funds in his bank account. Fortunately, the tax was due next year, so Zhang Hai did not have to worry about it now. However, he really did not have any extra money now. Therefore, he was prepared to go to sea again after receiving the fish seedlings and other things sent from China. Anyway, those sunken ships in the Caribbean are useless. Instead of just staying there, It's better to let him take the things on them and sell them for money. With this experience, Zhang Hai's heart became more and more wild. According to the sea charts he bought, there were at least 6 more sunken ships that he could move. He did not expect each of these 6 ships to be like the first one. There was also the Spanish Emperor's golden helmet, but as long as there were those jewels, it would be a good thing. If one ship was worth 300 million, then the 6 ships would be worth 1.8 billion. Apart from the 1 billion he needed to buy oil futures, he still had 800 million in capital. It would be convenient for him to do anything, right? As the saying goes, if you have money in your pocket, you will not panic. Now that Zhang Hai had spent all his money, he was indeed a little panicked. However, it did not cost much to dig a freshwater river. Zhang Hai had told Robbins and the others yesterday that he wanted to dig a freshwater river. Last night, while barbecuing, Zhang Hai had discussed it with Robbins and Ai Dehua. The two of them were very calm about Zhang Hai wanting to dig a freshwater river because they did not eat freshwater fish. Therefore, it was difficult for them to understand why Zhang Hai wanted to dig a freshwater river. However, since Zhang Hai said he wanted to do it, then they would help Zhang Hai think of a way. In fact, it was quite easy to dig a river. The soil and water in Zhang Hai's place would not be lost. The grasslands and the like were deeply rooted. The river did not need to be too deep, about 1.5 meters deep. This depth would not drown people or cows. It also did not need to be too wide. About 4 meters would do. After all, Zhang Hai was here to raise animals. The bottom layer was sand, which was directly transported from the seaside and reinforced by the river. The entire river could be made quite good with just a few $100,000. As for the source of the river, it would be more troublesome because it was easy to use the river water from Winthrop. It did not cost much, and they only needed to dig the river. However, it was easy to cause disputes. After all, the river did not belong to Zhang Hai. Therefore, Zhang Hai decided to dig the source, which meant digging a spring. Digging a spring would cost $30,000, and it was not like he could not afford it. However, it still had to be said that labor in the United States was indeed expensive. If it was in China, it might not even cost $800,000. However, this was the United States, and the cost was in dollars. Naturally, the domestic price could not be compared to the domestic price here. The Boston area was quite rich in both freshwater and seawater resources, so Zhang Hai did not have to worry about it at all. After discussing it last night, Zhang Hai finished his run this morning. After eating breakfast, he drove over. He was going to find Mayor Wallace and ask the designer he knew to take a look at his manor and design a river that could enter the sea. At the same time, he was going to find the construction team to discuss how to dig the river. Driving all the way to Winthrop, Zhang Hai looked at the construction team in front of him, looking for Mayor Wallace. According to Moses Adams, the person in charge of the town hall now was not Mayor Wallace, but Shite Clive. Mayor Wallace Kirk was at the construction site almost every day. If Zhang Hai wanted to find him, he had to look here. Sure enough, before he reached the town center, Zhang Hai saw Mayor Wallace in a hard hat at the intersection of the commercial street that was being built in the distance. Beside him was a big man who was holding a piece of paper and saying something to him. Mayor Wallace. Looking at the two people here, Zhang Hai called out first. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the two people also raised their heads. After seeing Zhang Hai, Mayor Wallace smiled and waved his hand. After parking the car in an open space in the distance, Zhang Hai jumped out of the car and walked to Mayor Wallace. Hi Zhang, I heard that you went back to Huaxia. When did you come back? Seeing Zhang Hai coming over, Mayor Wallace was very excited. Looking at his town changing every day, it would be strange if he was not excited. I just came back yesterday. Looking at Mayor Wallace, Zhang Hai said with a smile. You just came back yesterday. Why didn't you rest at home today? What are you doing in town? Buying something? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also knew that the long-distance flight was very tiring, so he asked with some doubts. No, I'm here to find you. I want to open a river channel in my manor, so I want to find a construction team and a designer. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Zhang Hai explained his intentions to him. But hearing what Zhang Hai said, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but be stunned. Just like Robbins and Ai Dehua, he also couldn't understand why Zhang Hai wants to open a river channel. Maybe rich people like to do this. You don't need to find a designer to open a river channel. This is just a small project. Let me introduce you. This is Hut Charles. He is from our town and is now the person in charge of building the commercial street. You can find him for this. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.